What's up, Mom? I'll be right back. Yo, how we doing? All right. All right, all right, all right. There we go. What's good, Tukes? We're going to assume drama happened because of his ego. Oh, yeah. Okay. What's up, goofy fellow? What's up with his mom? Good, good, good. Nini, nice to meet you. First time chat on Twitch. Hell yeah. Okay. What's up, birds? Alrighty. There we go. There we go. Actually gonna try this here. Perfect. Sorry, I'm just moving some stuff around. It's raining right now. Okay. So, in essence, right? I don't need that there. I just want to make sure I have my Twitch chat as well. Yo. Mom, I'm in both chats at once. There we go. Who is that? Well, nice to meet you. Okay, so essentially, oh, it's Goofy Fellow. I was making a video. I was currently recording. And while I was recording, I was kind of hit with this, like, there's so much that I want to cover in this that I might as well just stream it because there's so much to cover. So I'll leave it up as a VOD as well, but I'm going to record it too. Let me go ahead and I'm actually going to pause this music. So let's start off with the basics, right? Before I start recording, I spoke to PirateSoftware. Speaking is a very weak way to phrase it, but I chatted with PirateSoftware. I'll show you guys those DMs. He did give me approval to do this. And matter of fact, you know, as a stream exclusive, I will show you guys the, what is it called? I'll show you guys my full message where I introduced speaking to him. Let's just do, hold on, sorry. Perfect. Okay. Oh, wow, I thought it wasn't big drama. No, this is huge. This is, yeah. So let's start off this. I should also pre-sup. I'm going to be covering this. I was trying to be very respectful to Pirate. I genuinely think he has some really bad thoughts on this. I thought initially, too, when I had first messaged him, that being yesterday, that he had some really good points that I hadn't really dug into. And I think I was wrong on that front. But I want to make it clear, I wasn't like lying to him when I was chatting with him about to show that message. But after, you know, further researching after I had messaged him, some of the points that I thought he had that were pretty good were kind of completely debunked by Ross, or countered by Ross, I should say. So here's that. Let me make sure this is all viewable here. Okay, cool. Perfect. All right. So I'm going to read this out so you don't have to, like, you know, zoom in, do all this stuff. But so I said, I sent this to Kronos as well because I was his lead mod, but in case he glances over it as a ticket thing, I wanted to reach out directly to you. My name's Connor Quinthio on YouTube, and I've got 46K subs. I talk about content creator drama, and I've talked about you in the past. I've spoken negatively about you in some of those videos, and I just want to make that apparent beforehand, as I don't want this to come off as me trying to pull something. Essentially, I was researching a video to talk about the STG initiative, the Stop Killing Games. Oops, I did that wrong. Initiative, and admittedly was frustrated with the drama that has come up in regard to your take. My biggest issue is not your thoughts or perspectives, as you make great points in regard to the critiques you have, but more specifically that you have not had a discussion with Ross. I genuinely think that a discussion between you two would be incredibly useful for both sides. I think you have some legitimate criticisms, and working through them with Ross, who's the leader of the Stop Killing Games initiative, could potentially create helpful changes to the initiative. On the other side, Ross being able to work through and explain himself and his side more in depth would not only give him some much needed clarity to points that he hasn't fleshed out, but additionally having this discussion, I think would greatly help with the toxicity that is developed from these disagreements. Now, the specific points that I was talking about him not fleshing out, he actually did in the video that I had yet to fully watch. But so, moving on past that, I say, there we go. I know you have said in the past that you won't speak to Ross, so I understand this is pretty much a shot in the dark, but I truly think this is a win-win for everyone involved. I'm trying to sell him the idea of having this discussion, right? I say, last thing, I know I said it earlier, but I have made videos about you. More specifically, I've spoken negatively about you, and I don't want to hide that. I want to moderate and keep the discussion unbiased and make sure both of you get through everything you'd like to, and there's nothing I can type up that can convince you that I'm truly not doing this to make you look bad. That's a consequence of making those videos, and I accept that doing so jeopardizes this from ever leaving the ground. I said, I know I would benefit from moderating the discussion with the attention it would bring, but sincerely, I also want this to happen because I've had a similar issue myself. I've had drama with creators in the past that was completely resolved by sitting down and having a conversation. That's what was running through my head when I was researching and heard you talk about not wanting to speak with Ross, and given that past experience as well as you being upset previously about nobody reaching out to ask for your side in past dramas, guilty of that myself, I wanted to try this first. Sorry for the short novel. If you have any questions or want to speak with me, I'm more than happy to chat. So I go through this, and it took me like genuinely an hour. I also sent an email to Ross, but at this point, him following up on that is kind of moot since, Pirate was not interested in having the conversation. But so he responded back. Right. The lack of communication, like truly, I was just, because at the end of the day, well, actually, I'll get there. So Pirate responds to me, this should explain why I haven't talked to Ross. And he sent a tweet, which I'm going to go over with you guys, and that's when I'll start recording. But he sends this tweet to me, and then he says below that, to be real, it seems like most of your content is react/hate chasing. Some of these are kind of insane, but at the same time, I can see they are effective at getting views. While I may not respect it, I get it. So I responded back. Fair enough. He taking shots at me, but he said, well, I may not respect it. I get it. Admittedly, if I wouldn't say he's a worm for that. If he just looked at my thumbnails at face value, I don't blame him for having that assertion. My most recent video is, well, let's just look at it. Okay, well, I mean, yeah, let's just be real for a sec, right? My most recent video is the Ludwig Mango humping situation is insane. The one before that is Mr. Beast is getting his cheeks clapped. Thank you, Goofy Fella, for the membership. And admittedly, I think him being very honest about his thoughts about the channel is, I appreciate that. I appreciate that he was like, respect the grind. If that is how he perceives it, it's like, respect the grind. That's what he's doing. And he's just saying it seems like most of the content is react hate chasing. You didn't say that it was, right? In my opinion, a streamer that just discriminates all commentary stuff is a red flag, but he did not do that. He did not do that, Azul. He looked at my stuff on my singular, like he just looked at my channel thumbnails and made that assessment. That he's not talking about every single, commentary thing ever. He just looked at my stuff, and I did speak negatively about him. And I also have in the past reacted very quickly to stuff and just, done drama. All I'd say, I'm not, defending his point of views or anything like that, but to say that this is disrespectful, I'm not so sure of that. I think he was just blunt. I think he was just quite candid with his thoughts. But anyway, I respond back to him. I say, fair enough. Because at this point, I'm like, all right, if he doesn't want me moderating this, because I'm an absolute nobody that has shit talked him before, like it's Thor, he's dealt with other people like that. I say, fair enough. I know I've jumped too quickly onto things, and I remember seeing you call it out during previous drama you've been in. For what it's worth, that has legitimately stuck with me, so I thank you for that. This is referencing him talking about how no one reached out to him for his side. I think it was in the OnlyFans drama or the other one that he was in. But he says, so that's what I was referencing, because now I try to reach out to more content creators when I'm covering them. I say, if the book is closed on this, meaning the conversation that he should have with Ross, if the book is closed on this because you aren't cool with me moderating or being a part of it, I'll keep out of it. Over everything, I think that conversation would do a great deal of good in reducing how polarized people have become on this, and I know that's antithetical to my channel, but that was my goal starting out. I said, not expecting you to look at my stuff, but even with my interview with Dogpack, I did my best to levy criticism and be even-keeled. I've dropped the ball on that recently, and I'm making an effort to get back into making that a focal point of my content. Regardless of your decision, I do really appreciate that you responded back to me. So I was just trying to be like, yeah, I'm making a concerted effort to focus more on, giving both sides of it, regardless of, if I'm introducing my opinion or not. And then I also follow up because he wasn't responding, not nearly as quickly as he had before. So I followed up just to check and I said, sorry, one more thing. Would you be comfortable with me sharing your response for a video I'm making on this? If not, I can leave it out. And he said, as long as you share it in full and not in portions. So that's what I wanted to do since I was showing it on stream. But if that's the impression you got from a first glance of your content, that shows he's clouded by bias and can't be bothered to actually give it a watch. The expectation that he should watch my content and form an opinion when he has a full-time job that doing this, that's asking a lot. That's me asking for a lot from him. Like, the expectation should not be that he goes through my content when spends hours doing so to make a judgment call on me when I'm sending him a pitch to do something together that would be public. Like, there is an innate gain that I would have from that. And that should not be the expectation. That's very, what is that called? I'm acting like I'm owed that in some way. And I don't agree with that. Entitled. I'm not entitled to his time. I'm not entitled to, him making a concerted effort to get a detailed understanding of who I am. So I don't agree with that personally. It's a bummer because it would have been lovely to actually have a conversation between the two of them. But other people tried a lot harder than I did. Like, yeah, I spent an hour concocting a message to send to him, but Moist Critical had a multi-hour conversation with him in DMs, and so did another person as well. All good, Mom. Thanks for stopping by. But now let's get into the tweet that he sent, or that he linked to me, right? Let's pull this up. I've got so many tabs open. Okay. There we go. Okay. So pull the tabs down. Yeah. Okay. Let's take a look here. All right, now we've got this all set up. Okay. So this is his first message, which I'm not going to be reading because I read it in the recording that I have so far. Oh, hello. Okay, thanks, NVIDIA. But I will focus on one specific part of it. Where is it? Sorry. Here we go. So the reason I'm making this video is when I read this in his message. So I'd seen this one, but I read through it again after he linked me. So he linked me, sorry, this right here. He linked this follow-up message. So we're going to be going over that, but let's focus on this first. So he says, let's dig into what I actually did and said. I put out 2 videos on August 6th, 2024 and August 7th of 2024. These videos are linked at the bottom of this post. Many people have not watched them and are just calling me a liar or attacking my character. Give the videos a watch, read the initiative itself, make a conclusion that you aren't copy pasting from social media. So that is exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to go over these. I watched them all yesterday. I did my research. I watched Ross's follow-up video where he said that where Thor said that he was being taken out of context. So we're going to see if that's true, and go over it and see if any of the criticisms that he has can be dismissed by being, misrepresentations of what the actual causes of the, Stop Killing Games initiative is. If people are just misconstruing what he's saying. But let's start with that. But let's start with the one that he linked me. Okay. So he says, just talk to Charlie and Josh Strife Hayes for a bit in DM. So he talked to Moist Critical Charlie. If you're mad at me for being a dick to Ross, I get it. And I'm sorry for that. This is him referencing kind of being emotionally charged about Ross's video that he put out. He said, I get it and I'm sorry for that. I should not have lashed out, but I had an emotional response due to how important the subject is to me. On the developer side, I have been in constant battle with people online for nearly a decade, trying to inform them how difficult it is to make and release video games. The idea that any of these technical hurdles are easy to overcome and would be simple to implement is the exact kind of thing I've been fighting. Okay. To blanket the movement and not separate it is actually insane. No one... Okay, hold on, sorry. So he said, okay, so as an older person, I know where Thor is coming from. To blanket the movement and not separate it is actually insane. No one in the EU government. Could you clarify that a little bit for me? What's up, So right here, Essentially, he's saying it would be infeasible, it would be, nigh impossible, or it would, have a detrimental impact on the game industry to include the things that the Stop Killing Games initiative is trying to include. And he'll specify that right now. When I bring up the issues with leaving online games in a when I bring up the issues with leaving online games, when I bring up the issues with leaving online only games in a functional playable state after sunsetting, I am always met with responses diminishing the effort needed to do that. This is not a simple hurdle to overcome and is exactly why I don't like this initiative. You can't leave these challenges up to a figure it out mentality, and you can't diminish the work of those on the dev side just because you want your way. So the other point, kind of just in conjunction, is that people are saying, or like diminishing the response or efforts needed to do that. So he's saying that this is an incredibly difficult thing to do that you're supposed to just figure out, is, trying to establish a functional playable state for online only games. Think like World of Warcraft or, Team Fortress 2, good example. And so he says, movements like this showcase to me how little the general public understands about game development. Movements like this showcase to me how little the general public understands about game development, modern gaming architecture, and online games as a whole. That's why I put videos out poking holes in this, because it sets the entire conversation back to the Stone Age in terms of developer/player understanding. Making shit is hard. Making shit when people think it's easy is harder. If you want all games to be left in a functional, playable state, then you need to listen to people when they talk about how infeasible that will be in a lot of situations. Since this is the initiative's primary goal is listed on the ECI page, it's kind of important to resolve that. So, in essence, his last piece, he is saying that the general public doesn't understand game development to a degree that would be useful to understand why this would not be an okay thing to do. Why Stop Killing Games initiative and leaving games in a functional, playable state. He's showing that, people's lack of knowledge about this, making things leaving things in a functional, playable state, how that is a detriment to this initiative and how it's a detriment to gaming as a whole, to creating games. Okay. And so he just highlights that initiative calls to require publishers that sell or license video games to consumers in the European Union or related features and assets sold to leave said video games in a functional, playable state. Now, that being kind of weird. Hold on, actually, I do want to see this. Okay, so Unholy Monk says, so the argument is that all games need to be preserved, all games, literally every single game. Now you meet a complicated government that has many regulations, intellectual property restriction. So I would need to know a bit more about what you're specifically talking about when you follow up by saying a complicated government that has many regulations. Those regulations are not at all impacting the games that are being created now. And as it stands, the Stop Killing Games initiative is not just making stuff into law. It is the initiative. It is starting the conversation and getting it in front of EU to see if there can be some sort of compromise between the two parties to make something that would, be more consumer friendly. So let me see here. So let's start with this. So this is, this is the reply. He talked to Charlie and Josh. Now, Moist Critical is Charlie. That's who he's talking about here. He made a video. Matter of fact, he had made 2 videos about this. Let's jump to, I'm going to use this one. Moist Critical. He made a second video. Where is it? Go to here. PirateSoftware situation. So just at 2 million views. So this is him talking about having that conversation and how it was just completely futile. That it just ended up going in circles and that he was really not satisfied with that. So he includes the stuff. He goes over it himself, and he said he's really frustrated with them. And he's saying, oh, okay, hold on. I'll make sure you guys can hear that. Oh, you guys can't because, hold on here. You should be able to in a second here. If I do... Okay. How about that?
I cannot believe his ego. His ego is so out of control.
How's that sound? Good. So essentially, right, we're talking about that. There we go. You're good at writing kind messages. Oh, thank you. So he goes into it and he's just like, he's super frustrated and he points a lot to Pirate's ego. He does not walk back anything. He's not interested in walking back any of the arguments that he's made or like just like taking any sort of acceptance of fault, you know, especially in regard to this entire situation. Like he has had a detrimental impact on the Stop Killing Games initiative. And maybe it's because he really doesn't believe in it. Maybe it's because he thinks it truly is a negative. It has a negative impact on the gaming industry. Maybe that's why he's not upset about it. But like, I like this video from Charlie. He's better when he's angry and has roid rage. And yeah, Charlie has come out of the woodworks. He has been out of the drama game for 10 months. And like he even intros that and says that this has brought him back into it. But let's, you know, and I'm trying to, because I started this endeavor, this research into this video with an earnest attempt to extend an olive branch to PirateSoftware. And I'm not trying to be like high and mighty about that, but to be like, hey, out of everything, it would be the most useful to have this conversation between you and Ross. Miscommunication is the entire reason that we're having arguments now, that there's drama today. So if you just have the conversation and just make it clear you disagree on certain points between each other and work through that discussion, then maybe this could be good. Maybe this could go kaput, and then we don't have to deal with the toxicity that he's dealing with. And I was like genuinely trying to make a vested effort in that. And just because he wasn't interested in that isn't going to mean, oh, I'm going to turn tail and, you know, just start bashing the guy. But I do want to address, after, you know, I had that conversation with him, I hadn't at that point watched Ross's video where he brought up his counterpoints to everything that Pirate has brought up. And initially, I thought he wasn't going to do that. I didn't think he was going to cover every single piece of it, but he did, to the best of my knowledge. But let's start off first by listening and trying out what Pirate suggested that people do. We're going to look over and watch through his first two videos. I'm going to play it at like 1.25 speed. I'll throw up captions for you guys. And then let's go through and address each of the points that he's talking about. I think the best thing to do to start that, though, is we are going to start first with watching Accursed Farms, or what's his name? We're going to watch Ross's first video talking about the Stop Killing Games initiative, okay? This is the video that he had an issue with. I'm going to pause and just kind of like cover those points that I really see Pirate talking about specifically. Okay. Sorry if I'm out of the loop, but why do you have an old setup while you have a new one in recent videos? So just in case you didn't know, I was at VidCon. I recorded in a hotel room because I was at VidCon, and then my last video talking about Mango, I was at another friend's that I was staying at in LA. So that was the setup behind me for that. So it's only for that single video because now I'm back home. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started off first with his video here, okay?
Several months, I've been working on a campaign to stop the...
Oh, sorry, it was at 1.5 when I was researching.
The destruction of... Hi, I'm Ross. For the past several months, I've been working on a campaign to stop the destruction of video games. See, most video games work indefinitely, and yeah, that's pretty much it. But more and more are being designed to stop working the second support ends from the publisher. A kill switch, essentially. It's a form of planned obsolescence, where publishers are destroying games they've already sold to you, but keeping your money. And this is all preventable. Some people don't understand that. I've compared this before to studios from a century ago burning their own films after they were done showing them to recover the silver content. And now most films of that era are gone forever. That's very similar to what's happening to video games today. It's just a terrible practice for everyone involved. Now, most of my efforts have gone towards challenging the legality of this practice in various countries because it's so consumer hostile, it's not clear if what's going on is even legal. That's still ongoing, but now we have a new option, proposing new law, and for the entire European Union. It took months to get put together and processed, but now we have a European Citizens Initiative devoted to halting the destruction of video games.
Okay. So, right now, as of right now, he's kind of been talking about, he's been referencing single player games, talking about how, like, originally, when we first started playing video games, think back to, like, if you had like a PlayStation 2, things like that, you'd go buy the, actual disc in the store in a case, and you would own that game. They can't take it away because the software is running, on your PlayStation at home, right? So we've made a shift from that to where you have to be connected to games. And he wasn't, and I mean, we could listen to this here.
Now legal, because now similar to what's happening to video games today. It's just a terrible practice for everyone involved. Now, most of my efforts have gone towards challenging the legality of this practice in various countries because it's so consumer hostile, it's not clear if what's going on is even legal. That's still ongoing, but now we have a new option, proposing new law.
Oh, wait.
And for the and this is all preventable. Some people are destroying games, a kill switch. But more and more are being designed to stop working the second support ends from the publisher. A kill switch, essentially. It's a form of play.
So he's not just directly talking about single player games here. He's just saying that there are games where the support ends from the publisher and there's a kill switch. And so now you don't get to have access to that game anymore. You can think too, like, I'm sure you guys were like raging when that was kind of first introduced. There were a lot of live service games, or like, I think it was Diablo 4. So Diablo 3, you didn't have to always be online. But when they moved over to Diablo 4, they said you were always going to have to be online, even though, although that they were having this like MMO style part of it, and they had these like large, entire server boss raids, world boss raids, or world boss events, there was still a massive single player experience to Diablo 4, and not being able to be connected to the game if you're not online, that was a huge stink. That caused a massive stink. Well, that's, he's talking about all of it. And maybe, the assumption could be made that, maybe this is implying single player games. I didn't really get that from his video, but that is an argument that Pirate talks about, but we haven't even covered everything. So let's make sure that it doesn't get brought up further down in this video. I don't want to jump the gun there. Crew is the best example, and even Pirate mentions that. He scapegoats to talking about WoW raids and things like Roblox. It's so strange. So Crew, I think that's the one that they brought up specifically because they were trying to go after them. They were trying to go after Ubisoft because they thought that was illegal. But let's go here.
It's a form of planned obsolescence, where publishers are destroying games they've already sold to you, but keeping your money. And this is all preventable. Some people don't understand that. I've compared this before to studios from a century of this practice legal for the entire European Union. It took months to get put together and processed, but now we have a European Citizens Initiative devoted to halting the destruction of video games. You can read it yourself. This would require publishers to leave games they have sold to customers in a working state at the time of shutdown, without requiring any further connection to them or affiliated parties for the games to function. How they would do this would be up to them. This would also apply to free-to-play games that contain microtransactions. Because if you purchased a microtransaction as a good, then the game is made unplayable, well then you just lost your goods. This would not require publishers.
Okay, so let's just go over what's on the screen, right? So
for the games to function. How they would do this would be up to them.
So the first thing he says is they need to be left in a functional, playable state, or he didn't say those exact words, but it needs to be left in a playable or working state at the time of shutdown, and how they do that is up to them. Now that could end up being like very difficult to do. There might not be an easy way to do that. Let's just, that's not what is assumed at this point. But then
this would also apply to.
But then taking a look here, so what the initiative would do: require video games sold to customers to be in a reasonably working state at the time of shutdown / end of support. Second point, prohibit any requirements for video games sold to customers to connect to the publisher or affiliated parties after support ends. So that's like the reason that a lot of them do that, from my understanding, the reason that a lot of publishers make you connect online is because they're doing a check to see if you have a legitimate copy of the game. That's that's in order to prevent piracy. But if the game is shut down, if they are no longer servicing the game, the argument that's being made then is that, well, you don't need to check if it's a legitimate copy of the game, because by shutting it down, you're fully expecting to not be receiving any more revenue from that game. Like you've cut the tie. You're not going to pay for servers. You're not going to do any of this. You're just, this is it. So if you're already cutting that tie off, why do you need to be checking at that point? Usually at that point, the game has run its course. There's like no community left except for diehard fans. So back there. And then finally, require the above also, last one here, require the above also apply to video games that sell game assets or features, microtransactions to customers, which is actually very interesting because they're starting to, the EU is actually recently trying to pass some stuff in regard to if you have bought microtransaction goods, that you have the ability to refund them. And they're trying to give more, freedom to consumers. So like Fortnite V-Bucks and stuff. I'm sure you heard like insane things about parents losing like $3,000 because their kids buying a ton of V-Bucks and then trying to get that refunded was like nigh impossible. But here in this example, those purchased goods, like he said, you have no access to those purchased goods after these games shut down if they don't have a way for you to, get a hold of them. So the required above also apply to video games that sell assets or features, right? So that makes sense. Unholy Monk says, so basically I just need to wait for the game to release and then just die so we can get it for free. So that's not what I said. What I said is usually when a game runs its course and the publishers are saying we're cutting ties, we're not servicing the game anymore, that's usually because we're working at a loss right now, or we're not making enough money to justify the cost of keeping servers up, because usually that's what we're talking about here. So if they are cutting ties at that, if they're not making that money, then why would they be worried about people pirating the game at that point? If they've already made the expectation set that they're not expecting to receive any more, receive any legitimate sort of earnings from the game, what's the point then? So why wouldn't we game the system? Because typically when they're shutting down the game, that's because it's been years after the game is released. Think of like The Crew, which had like 20 concurrent players when they shut it down. Why would they need to make sure that people aren't pirating the game? The only people that are usually playing a game that far after, especially after they've stopped servicing the game, many people playing it are people that already own it. So why would we need to check? Yeah. Couldn't they transfer rights to another company and then close the company? What do you mean by that? Yeah, the microtransaction part is interesting. Like Fortnite skins, if Epic ever shuts down, Fortnite would just get all my money back for them. Shut down Fortnite, would I just get all my money back for them? I mean, as it stands now, no. If right now, if your cosmetics, like if the game shuts down, you don't receive that money back. That's like, I don't even know what to compare that to, but like that's kind of the sucky situation in regard to that. But moving on.
Free-to-play games that contain microtransactions. Because if you purchased a microtransaction as a good, require publishers to give up any of their intellectual property rights.
Unholy Monk, no, we just wait for Concord to release, just wait for it to die, and then we play it for free on our private servers. Exactly. If the game does that horribly, Marathon? Yeah, I mean, if it's bad, people will definitely do that.
Give up their source code? Though that one would still be nice.
Okay, let's focus.
Give up any of their data unplayable, well then you just lost your goods. This would not require publishers to give up any of their intellectual property rights, give up their source code, though that one would still be nice. It wouldn't require endless support. They can end it anytime they want as far as we're concerned. They wouldn't need to host servers. Though they would have to either patch out that requirement or else allow customers to host them privately. Assume any liability for what customers do with their copies of games. And finally, nothing about this initiative would have any impact on publisher business practices while the game is being supported. Can continue doing whatever they want as long as you get supported.
Okay, hold on.
In other words, publishers can continue doing whatever they want as long as you get to keep your game. It amazes me when some people say that's going too far in favor of the consumer. Though to be fair, that's probably not most Europeans. The idea here is...
Okay, so to go over that again, to clarify, he's saying the initiative would not require publishers to give up their intellectual property rights. It's not requiring them to do that. It's not requiring publishers to give up source code, although that would be useful, but you can understand how giving up the source code if they were going to make a sequel, that could be an issue, right? The third would not require endless support. So having the game left in a functional, playable state does not mean endless support. Those are not the same thing. One is saying, hey, we just want to be able to play the game, similar to like think of any like older game. I'm thinking of like Team Fortress 2. There were a bunch of community servers before there were even official servers for that game. So even initially, so people would be able to play on servers that they're able to privately host. Like it's saying below here what they would not be, what they're not supposed to do, or what the initiative is not telling publishers to do. So MMO example, they're allowed to put up the, allow players to put up those servers, which means that they don't have to service the game anymore. It's just to allow players to do it themselves. And then it says would not require publishers to host servers. So again, we're not forcing you to spend money. They're saying we're not forcing you to spend money on hosting servers. We're just saying, give that ability to the players if that is what's needed for the game, right? It's not an always thing. It's not if it's just a single player game already, And then right there, it would not require publishers to assume liability for customer actions, because that would be really dumb. And that would be so counterintuitive to what the point of this is. And then lastly, what it's saying there, it would not interfere with business practices in any way while a game is still being supported, because all it's talking about is specifically at the end of its life cycle. When they're hitting the kill switch or when they're stopping support, they just want the game to still be playable. So it doesn't matter, how the game is being ran while it's, in its live phase. That's it. So there we go. So that's in essence, right? That's what he's covered. I think we've kind of hit all those points.
Are in favor of the consumer. Though to be fair, that's probably not most Europeans. The idea here is we're just trying to stop games from being destroyed. That's it. So we're taking as narrow an approach as possible that still solves the problem. If we get enough signatures, then this goes before the European Union to be considered as new law. Now, if you're on board with this, you don't have to keep watching. You can go sign it right now. But wait, before it still solves the problem. If we get enough signatures, then this goes before the European Union, just consumer. Though to be fair,
so I think this is the really important part that I think it's important to hear.
Fair, that's probably not most Europeans. The idea here is we're just trying to stop games from being destroyed. That's it. So we're taking as narrow an approach as possible that still solves the problem. If we get enough signatures, then this goes before the European Union to be considered as new law.
So they're keeping it very specific. We want to stop them from, removing your game and removing your access to the games that you purchase, like, has been most of gaming, just getting a hard copy. That's the opportunity that you had when you were getting a hard copy of the game, right?
Now, if you're on board with this, you don't have to keep watching. You can go sign it.
So now he goes into listing, essentially, the rest of this is just talking about, like how to sign, what to do with that. But this last part here, this is something that Pirate had an issue with.
But is this as simple as people sign this and it becomes law in the EU? Yeah, it might be. Now, it's not a guarantee, but I think if we get the signatures, this passes. Why do I say that? Well, it's a few factors. Politicians...
So to preface that, he said, I think this could pass as law if this happens. And so he explains a few factors as to why this could pass.
Like easy wins. And this doesn't require them to say that? Well, it's a few factors. Politicians like easy wins, and this doesn't require them to do much at all. And unless it involves gambling or protecting children, politicians generally don't care about video games. So this isn't of big consequence to them or most of their constituencies. EU law is already unclear on a lot of this practice anyway, and we would be making it easy for them to settle it. It falls in line with other consumer practices. You know how when you buy something, you're generally allowed to keep it? And finally, this is a diversion from really serious topics that politicians would prefer not to deal with. This would let them stay busy and avoid hard stuff. In fact, I would bet if we can clear the signature, this would let them stay busy.
So this is a big contentious issue that Pirate had with this originally, and we're going to be going over his response after this. But so the reasons the ECL or ECI could pass: politicians like easy wins. Politicians mostly don't care about video games. The law is already unclear on this practice, would make it easier for them to come to terms with that. Bada bing, bada boom. The initiative is in line with other consumer policies, so it just makes sense, right? And it's a diversion from more serious topics. So he's explaining how this could be an actual hook, line, sinker, an easy way to get this kind of thing approved. And so that's kind of his general framework for this entire video. And then he goes into the different ways and talking about how to get the signatures and how it matters to get them, in the types of ways that they need. So now let's move into Pirate Software's videos about stop killing games. Okay.
Hi, my name is Jason Thor Hall, also known as
1.5 again, sorry.
Pirate Software Online. I've been in the gaming industry for about 20 years. I used to work at Blizzard Entertainment, then Amazon Game Studios, and now I am
Remember, guys, he did used to work at Blizzard.
my own studio, Pirate Software, by the same name, which is an indie studio, and I've been here for about 8 years now. I also run a massive community. We've got about 180,000 people in Discord, and most of what I do is try to teach other people how to make games, teach them that they can make games, show them the tools to do so, and try to do everything without any paywalls or bullshit in the way. It's incredibly important to me that we keep making games and that the next generation has the tools to do so that our medium doesn't die out. And it never will. And that's the whole intention of all of this. So with that in mind,
So big deal, right? He's a game dev. He wants people to be able to keep making games. And that's kind of like his approach coming in as to why he's not really big fan of this.
community brought me this and tried to get me to sign it. And I don't want to. Number one, I can't because I don't live in Europe. But number two, I wouldn't sign it even if I could. And I'm going to kind of go through this and try to explain the reasoning as to why that would be the case, without all of the internet hate machine that's grown up around it. So let's go into how this works and why this is an issue to me. First things first, what is an initiative? So an initiative is actually not law. It is something that you put together so you can put it up in front of representatives and they can start the conversation. The reason why I have a problem with Stop Killing Games is specifically it starts the wrong conversation. If we're trying to kill off the practice of developers putting together a live service game, pitching it as a single player experience, and then taking away support in the future, this ain't it. And
Okay. So to start things off, that is not what the goal that we have set forth. That is not the goal of Stop Killing Games. So let's start there. That is the first point that he's making, that he is combating against the Stop Killing Games initiative, and it's already coming from a misrepresented place. Let's listen to it again here.
if we're conversation. The reason why I have a problem with Stop Killing Games is specifically it starts the wrong
Matter of fact, we're going to slow it down now.
conversation. If we're trying to kill off the practice of developers putting together a live service game, pitching it as a single player experience, and then taking away support in the future, this ain't it. And
So that is not. So the point, as he had already described in the video that we had just watched, is to leave games in a functionally playable state after they hit the kill switch, after they stop providing like support to it or stop providing access, because sometimes a game will be single player and then they will just hit a kill switch. Like The Crew, there was an entirely single player aspect to that game, but because they removed their support to the game, you no longer can access the game. It is effectively dead. That single player aspect of it is removed. And not even just that single player aspect, but the ability to host a private server with that game is not available to you either. So the game has effectively been withdrawn from you. That's the issue. To give them a functional playable state. It's not to deprive, the market of live service games. It's to leave them in a playable state. That is the main initiative that he has circled and outlined multiple times in his tweets.
the reason why is specifically on this initiative, under its own description, it says, this initiative calls to require publishers that sell or license video games to consumers in the European Union or related features and assets sold for video games they operate to leave said video games in a functional playable state. Specifically, the initiative seeks to prevent the remote disabling of video games by the publishers before providing reasonable means to continue functioning of said video games without the involvement from the side of the publisher. This isn't always possible in all video games, and it doesn't call out the specific practice that this is supposedly trying to defeat. It is incredibly vague and will damage all live service games. How would you...
So, again, the focal point is not live service games. He keeps saying it is. It is not. As we had just read, alongside Pirate Software, the initiative calls to require publishers that sell or license video games, not just live service games, video games, to consumers in the European Union or related blah, 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 to leave said video games in a functional playable state. And then Pirate has just said that that is not always possible, but let's find out why.
Keep League of Legends in a...
Oh, and he also said that these points were too vague. And keep in mind, he had also pointed out earlier that this actually isn't law, that this isn't set in stone, this isn't law, this is an initiative. This is to get that conversation started.
functional playable state. You'd have to re-architect the entire how trying to defeat. It is incredibly vague and will damage all live service games. How would you keep League of Legends in a functional playable state? You'd have to re-architect the entire game. The game is what is called client server. So in client server models, there's a server and there's a client, and all of the math, all of the game, everything happens on the server. The client just displays it. And the reason we want to do it that way is so that you can't teleport around and do a billion damage. You don't trust the client. You trust the server. The client just displays what it's told, right? So if we wanted to re-architect this, we'd have to take all of that server logic, push it back out into the client, and somehow make that playable in a multiplayer-only video game. That doesn't make sense to me. So this isn't going to work for all games. Why is it calling out all games? And it's really easy to say client and somehow
here. So he made a point about League of Legends, how you'd have to completely restructure it to make it possible, right? Because if you don't have that server telling the client what to do, you know, you could just jump around, do anything all willy-nilly. And that's, I mean, that's true. If you look at like CS, if you're playing a game with your buddies, if you're just playing, you know, a private server game with your buddies, you know, one of your buddies can turn on no clip and just start zooming around the map and doing whatever they want. And I know that that's a different point than what he's making specifically, where they'd have to restructure it, but they wouldn't have to restructure it. Leaving it in a functional playable state would just mean that, you know, people could run their own servers. They would be able to run their own games on community servers. So they would be able to have a server that they would be able to connect to play the games that they wanted to play. It's like League of Legends. If you wanted to run a match, but they no longer provided service, you wouldn't have to fundamentally restructure the game. You would just need to allow consumers to like run their own private servers. That's it. And you know, admittedly, there's definitely for sure a bit more nuance to that. I'm not going to dismiss that. I'm not a game designer myself. But this is the point that Ross will continue to go on to in the future that we'll talk about as well. But you know, maybe I'm jumping ahead of myself again. But so that's his issue with League of Legends, and maybe he's making a point that I'm not quite understanding. But let's continue on. How is it legal to use fake posts as a thumbnail? To drive retention? I don't know. I don't really know why. I mean, I'm parodying. Like, it's clearly a joke tweet, but
I'll make that playable in a multiplayer only video game. That doesn't make sense to me. So this isn't going to work for all games. Why is it calling out all games? And it's really easy.
Here, I got you. Let's do this. Go. I do this. Hold on here. Let's make it more understandable. There we go. Perfect. Then I just gotta go over to here. Edit. There we go. I've added the word satire just in case. It's literally, I just ripped this thumbnail from one of my previous videos talking about him because I didn't have time to like fully make an entire one. Okay. So back to it, right?
Easy to say like, oh, you know, that'll get working. We'd have to take all of that server logic, push it back out into the client, and somehow make that playable in a multiplayer only video game. That doesn't make sense to me. So this isn't going to work for all games. Why is it calling out all games? And it's really easy to say like, oh, you know, that'll get worked out down the line. But we're dealing with government here. If we're going to be putting up these types of ideas specifically in front of government, we need to be calling out the right issues, especially if you don't have precedent set. Because now you're going to be setting precedent on something that doesn't make any sense with people that may not understand the nuance of our industry, all in the name of saving games. I can't agree with that. So let's go into why this is happening, right? So why did this start in the first place? What is the specific cases they've called out that are egregious? And they have one. It's the crew. So, action on The Crew. The video game The Crew, published by Ubisoft, was recently destroyed for all players and had a player base of at least 12 million people. Due to the game's size and France's strong consumer protection laws, this represents one of the best opportunities to hold a publisher accountable for this action. If we're successful in charges being pressed against Ubisoft, this can have a ripple effect on the video games industry to prevent publishers from destroying more games. First off, I don't like the idea in this that it has a player base of 12 million people. That is not how long-running games work. There is a
Okay. So this is one of the points that I do agree with him in. The way that they've framed this has made it seem like, as a player base of at least 12 million people. To say player base, usually people expect that that's like online active players, which realistically, that is not the case with The Crew. It never had a player base actively of like 12 million people. I think 12 million people purchased the game. But to say that they were all running at the same time, things like that, that's a bit disingenuous. And he's also going to showcase that as well. SWG Emu is a perfect example of what Thor is speaking out against. Players being required to write from the ground up a whole new server infrastructure just to play an MMO that devs shut down. Oh, I haven't heard of that. If you could link that to me, that would be amazing. But let's continue on with the point he's making here. Team Snapchat needs to fuck off, dude. Okay.
large number of people that buy the game, and that player base slowly dwindles off until nobody is playing it anymore. If there's any costs associated with keeping the game online, which this was an online video game, then eventually it costs more to keep it online than it does to keep running it, right? So the cost outweighs the amount of income for it. There are bad business practices that can occur in there. There are companies that will sell a online-only game as a...
Okay, hold on. Just one more time.
...anymore. If there's any costs associated with keeping the game online, which this was an online video game, then eventually it costs more to keep it online than it does to keep running it, right? So the cost outweighs the amount of income for it.
Of course. Over time, the viewer base or the player base is going to dwindle. Sales are not going to beat out the server costs. Absolutely.
It. There are bad business practices that can occur in there. There are companies that will sell a online-only game as a single-player experience and kind of just put it into the TOS and hide it. But not all companies do that. When they do, we should be calling out that specific company, not all companies. So let's take a look at this and find out more about the crew itself.
So he's hearing, okay, so we're talking about calling out Ubisoft, and then he's saying, well, this, Stop Killing Games initiative is going out of their way to call out all companies and make sure that none of them do that. I don't think it's an issue to set a precedent to make sure not all companies are doing that, but let's continue on.
If we pull up their Wikipedia, we can see that the crew was actually created in 2014, which, much to the hatred of all of us oldies on the internet, was 10 years ago. Oh. So this was an online-only racing video game developed by Ubisoft Ivory Tower and Ubisoft Reflections and published by Ubisoft. So all Ubisoft, right? With that in mind, it said it was a scaled-down recreation of the contiguous United States and included both role-playing and large-scale multiplayer elements. So it had a massive multiplayer component to it. It is an online-only service-based game, and they shut it down 10 years later. On March 31st, 2024, Ubisoft shut down the game's servers, rendering the game unplayable, which is normal for live service games. The only thing that I can see in here that could be a problem is if they posed it as not an online-only experience. But everything that I found online shows that the game was always marketed as online-only. If you're going to be buying an online-only game, that means it can only run when it's online. And if the servers need to shut down in the future, far in the future, it makes sense to me for the access to that game to be cut, if it's online only. If it's a single-player experience that has online-only functionality specifically just to shut down the game in the future, and the online-only doesn't actually add any gameplay functionality, I'd agree with you. That's a shitty business practice, but that's really rare. And in the specific cases...
That's really rare because that's like a very specific situation that you've constructed. Or... I would say that's just a rare situation because of how niche, like you've described it as such. But how it stands here, yes, you always had to connect online for the game, but there was an entire single player aspect to this game, to the gameplay. You don't have to connect with other people to play on this entire map that was, the contiguous United States sized down. You don't need to. Maybe people just enjoyed the game because they purchased it and they like to drive around. They didn't always have to play the multiplayer aspects. I played most of Diablo 4 completely solo. I had to deal with, having to play a completely online game, but there's an entire aspect to that game that is, you can completely solo. Like it is built to do that as well. The single player part, GG, it's gone now. Exactly. And on top of that, like if Diablo shuts down and they don't have their servers, like they're not supporting it anymore, goodbye. Like that game, even the single player aspects of it that I literally only really partook in, it's all gone. I'll never get access to those things because they hit a kill switch and, you know, we're not allowed to run our own servers.
Where it does happen.
So what he's specifically talking about, even in the crew, this isn't like the case that he's talking about is not representative because of course not. Of course, they're not making it just live service just so that they can go ahead and pull, pull the plug down the road.
We should call out that, not just all games and not all live service games. Further, there's more context to this too. Call out that, not.
And again, I don't understand why he keeps specific. Well, you know what? Let's not do that. And then just, you know, keep in mind that he completely multiple times reiterates that he's, you know, multiple times he reiterates that we should just be going after the particular people that he's specifying that are doing this like maliciously, as opposed to setting a precedent for all games.
Not just all games and not all live service games. Further, there's more context to this too. The Crew itself came out in 2014, but it actually had a sequel that came out in 2018. And then it had another sequel that came out in 2023. And if we go to the Crew's SteamDB, which again is not going to be all of the player base for this, it's only going to show the ones who were playing it through Steam. It was on multiple platforms. And we look at the max here, it did start out with a sizable amount of community, and then it degraded. And it had a major drop-off in 2018, which is the same year that it launched a sequel. This is normal. When a sequel comes out, a lot of the player base, if the sequel doesn't suck, will move over to it. And then the servers effectively die. You can't run a live service game on this few players. You can't most of the time, especially not if there's anything else that goes into it. And if we go into that anything else, and we could see that there was license problems. So on December 14th, 2023, Ubisoft delisted the Crew and its expansions from digital platforms, suspended sales of microtransactions.
And that's a lot of the argument that a lot of people are having, is that this is the issue. Just because it dies out, just because you are running at a negative cost for the company, doesn't mean that you should just completely torch the game and then never have any future access to it. That is the issue that people have. Again, not saying if that's right or wrong, but that's the specific issue, right? What's up, Serbian Warrior? Nice to meet you on Twitch there. I'm doing good. I hope you're doing well yourself.
Transactions and announced that the game's servers would shut down on March 31st. So they gave them 3 months. Usually I would say, hey, 6 months is probably a better deal, but if they're going to do 3 months, they're going to do 3 months.
Here,
the only thing that I'd be interested outside of that is if there was a contractual obligation to do more than 3 months and they didn't follow it, if it was in the terms of service or not. Citing upcoming server infrastructure and licensing constraints. What were those licensing constraints? Well, it turns out that all of the cars in the game were licensed from the car companies, and a 10-year running game likely means that they had licensed
Okay, sorry, I was doodling myself
more than 3 months and they didn't follow it, if it was in the terms of service or not. Citing upcoming server infrastructure and licensing constraints. What were those licensing constraints? Well, it turns out that all of the cars in the game were licensed from the car companies, and a 10-year running game likely means that they had license to them for 10 years, and that means that it would likely reopen for negotiation. Now, understand that's speculation, but I've seen this type of a deal many times in the industry while I've been working in it, so it's not unlikely. If you're going to have to renegotiate on a game that has so few players and is not turning a profit anymore, you're probably just going to forgo the renegotiation. And if those servers are aging, you're not going to want to recreate that infrastructure.
Okay, so again, the argument here is, okay, so the way that some games are built, like this one, they have like a deal, like a licensing for the cars in the game. So if you try to keep something functional like this, they would have to permanently keep, renewing those licenses and then working at a negative cost because they'd have to do that. That would be a big bummer. Absolutely.
And there are some people that'll say, well, just make it all single player. Well, I've explained that doesn't make any sense in the first place. If you're making it all single player, you'd have to carve off all of that, and it's developer time and money. When you already have sequels out and the game has basically no players left anyway, it makes more sense to just move on. I don't find that to be a problem from the developer perspective, and I understand that people find that to be a problem from the player perspective. These are two different ideologies, and that's okay to have two different ideologies. I just won't agree with it because I understand the burden that puts.
Hold on, sorry.
If money. When you already have sequels out and the game has basically no players left anyway, it makes more sense to just move on. I don't find that to be a problem from the developer perspective, and I understand that people find that to be a problem from the player perspective. These are two different ideologies, and That's okay to have two different ideologies. I just won't agree with it because I understand the burden that puts if we raise that problem in the way that we are right now. If you try to tell me that every studio needs to run their live service game indefinitely or not want to run one at all, then no one's going to run them. And we're going to miss.
So that conversation that he just had with the person that he's talking to is non-existent. Nobody, more specifically, nobody in the Stop Killing Games initiative, nor the Stop Killing Games initiative itself is making that argument. One more time.
Their live service game in the way that we are right now. If you try to tell me that every studio needs to run their live service game indefinitely or not.
Yeah, I'm with you. If you're telling people they have to run it indefinitely, that's ridiculous. Can we jump back really quick? There it is. Okay. So what the initiative would not do, is require endless support. Nobody said that. Nobody said it would require endless support. I believe the argument that Pirate has made back is just because you're saying would not require endless support. He's arguing that the way that it's set up, because like, let's say with the Crew, they had licensing to those car brands or whatnot, then it would require endless support. Because if you want a functional playable game with the cars in it, well, you're going to lose out on that. You know, you're not going to be able to make that happen because then they would have to require endless support to pay for those, right? I'm trying to work on the precept that he's introduced, and I'm not trying to counter it yet because we can do that further down. There is an argument against that, but I still want to pose it just on its own, and I'm trying to do my best here. So here we go.
Want to run one at all, then no one's going to run them. And we're going to miss out on adventures like Final Fantasy XIV. And even though I don't play anymore, League of Legends or any other live service game, any of them. You're talking everything, like even phone games, as funny as that is. A lot of people don't realize that phone games require online-only activity. What about things like Pokemon Go? What about stuff like Monster Hunter Now? What about...
So again, any live service game, any only online games, he's saying those would take a massive hit to a point that nobody would even make these types of games anymore. So we'd miss out on that entire, subgenre of gaming.
Any of these. We'd never get any of them. And that's why I think this needs to not be vague. It needs to be specific about the business practice it's trying to defeat, which is specifically, it needs to be any of them. And that's why I think this needs to not be vague. It needs to be specific about the business practice it's trying to defeat, which is specifically companies that are doing this under the guise of it being a single-player game, but adding online-only functionality that is not necessary and doesn't...
That is not true. That is flagrantly not true. Again.
It's trying to defeat, which is specifically companies that are doing this under the guise of it being a single-player game, but adding online-only functionality that is not necessary. And
there we go. Okay, so from Pirate's own words here, this screenshot that he himself took, this initiative calls to require publishers that sell or license video games to consumers in the European Union or related features and assets sold for video games they operate to leave said video games in a functional, playable state. That is not what they are saying. That is not what that's not what Pirate is saying here, and that's not what they're excuse me. That is not the argument that Pirate has just put forth. Is not the argument of the initiative. That is not the point of the initiative. Just want to go over with the transcript here. Where are we at?
Doesn't add any.
There we go. We're at 858. Okay. Needs to be specific about the business practice it's trying to defeat, which is specifically companies that are doing this under the guise of it being a single player game, but adding online functionality that is not necessary and doesn't add any gameplay elements. That's not what anyone's saying. He made that up. He brought that himself into the conversation. People have pointed this out, and he still has not walked that back at all, which is strange because this is a very clear misunderstanding. We're like completely good faith, which we're trying to do here. It was a misunderstanding on the initiative of the game, which he clearly seems to understand now based on him screenshotting that. But let's continue on.
Gameplay elements. That's the problem. So now we're going to go to Ross, otherwise known as Accursed Farms, the creator of this initiative, and one of the ones that's pushing it the most online. I'm going to let him say exactly why he thinks that this will go through very easily and why it is important, and then I'm going to tell you why I don't agree with it.
Okay. So I just want to respond to that message that I'm seeing in chat. Call it what it is. It is slander. That is completely no. That is not slander. That is not even close to slander unless we found out behind the scenes that he was doing this maliciously. He is not lying. He is not lying with malice. That is not the read of this situation. He the most logical thing that you can come up with is that he misunderstood the points of this because he's a developer and it got to him, in a personal way that, he's deeply passionate about making games. And so he's pushing back on those points. The best, most logical thing that you can take from this is that he is misunderstanding it. So for slander calls for someone to lie about you and do so with a malicious understanding that they are lying about it and they are doing it to defame you. He is misleading. You cannot prove in any way. And again, I also agree with Charlie, as he had made his video talking about this. The most logical take on this is that we do not know that. And so we need to take this at face value. And if we jump into calling it slander and doing these things, we are opening ourselves up to not having it like an actual useful conversation. And I'm not willing to shut this down or just minimize this down to slander. Because that takes away our ability to productively construct counterpoints to the actual argument that he's making. So we can still take it at face value. We can still, argue against the points that he's making, even if they aren't the points of the initiative. But I feel like it's useful to call out when it is misrepresenting the point. It's not that he's been caught lying multiple times. He's been caught being wrong multiple times. Like lying, I don't know. I'm getting misleading. He misunderstood. That's what I see multiple times.
Comes law in the EU? Yeah, it might be. Now, it's not a guarantee, but I think...
Okay, so this is the next thing that he really dislikes. So he's going to start talking about the slide that I showed you about this guy, why he thinks that this might pass.
If we get the signature...
Important, and then I'm going to tell you why I don't agree with it.
Comes law in the EU? Yeah, it might be. Now, it's not a guarantee, but I think if we get the signatures, this passes. Why do I say that? Well, it's a few factors. Politicians like easy wins, and this doesn't require them to do much at all. And unless it involves gambling or protecting children, politicians generally don't care about video games. So this isn't of big consequence to them or most of their constituencies.
I'm going to stop it there for a moment. The assertion that politicians just like easy wins, so this legislation will go through, or that politicians don't care about a multi-billion-dollar global industry and that it doesn't matter to their constituencies is incredibly absurd to me. I don't think this is the right direction at all for a movement like this. I think it's incredibly damaging and it makes our entire industry look bad, both on the player side and the developer side. If we're going to be putting forward anything that may eventually turn into legislation, it should be passing because it's the right thing to do for consumers and developers and that there's some kind of a middle ground, not just because it's an easy win and politicians don't care.
Okay. So next point he makes, he doesn't like this point and he doesn't like the points that Ross brings up in this slide that he's showing, because it's not being done for the right reasons. He's bringing up parts of it that are like this is disingenuous. Like if you're arguing or trying to bring this to law and you're saying that these are the reasons for it, that doesn't make sense, right? Like that's not working. That doesn't make sense, and it comes off really bad. It makes you look really bad. Is that here's a quote from the Actman that's been shared by several big creators. PirateSoftware intentionally misrepresented the Stop Killing Games movement, a movement intent on making sure consumers don't arbitrarily lose access to games they paid for. He intentionally lied about their goals, and when called out by the founder of the movement, Pirate refused to speak to them. That's deliberate slander. So just because the Actman says that he intentionally lied, that is not proof that he intentionally lied. If you have proof of him intentionally lying, I would love to see it. But just saying that someone else that has a big YouTube channel is saying it online does not make it true. He might believe it, which would mean that, he's not slandering PirateSoftware, but I'd love to see the proof of it. I know he has lied in the past. Like he's talked about, again, I've covered his other stuff. I've covered his, the OnlyFans shit. I've covered the other stuff. He has lied in the past, but specifically when we're talking about this, I have not seen that right out the gate. But there we go. But so he doesn't like this, like the political parts.
Sets us off on a completely wrong foot.
EU law is already unclear on a lot of this practice anyway.
And that's dangerous. If we're going to be setting precedent, which could change the way that law works all the way down the road, then we need to be sending the right message, which this is sending a vague message that doesn't cover the actual problem. So this is not a win to me. This is a huge risk.
Okay. So, like you said, it's too vague. He really doesn't like how vague it is.
We would be making it easy for them to settle it. It falls in line with other consumer practices. You know, how when you buy something, you're generally allowed to keep it?
In the case of live service games, in the terms of service for those, you are not buying the game. You're buying a license to the game. And that's the part.
Sorry, I need to go through that one more time. So, general consensus is he is lying, because why else would he say any of this? Why would someone go out of their way to misrepresent someone or something so much with which wait, what? To misrepresent something or something so much which doing research, that's malicious. Just because the general consensus, okay. Going to misrepresent someone or something so much without doing research, that's malicious. So again, logical fallacy. Just because most people think it, that doesn't make it true. That's not an argument. That's logically, that does not add up. So again, we need evidence. And if we're just going to do a thought exercise, well, there's reasons why he would say it, because he's a game developer. So he's going to have a different point of view. He is going to look at it from the side of developing games, especially in the industry that he's in right now. They have different licensing sets, like we talked about with The Crew. To try to make The Crew a functional, playable game for the rest of its life would cost them, they'd be running it at a net loss, because they would have to be paying that so much. Or because they would have to be paying those licenses forever and ever and ever. So that is a legitimate point. So there we go. Why would someone, there we go. No, but going out of your way to act like you have knowledge or expertise on something specific, like the movement, when he knowingly did not research it, nor did he speak with the founder when called out. He did read through the Stop Killing Games. He watched the video. That is knowledge and expertise. And he does have, like, quote unquote expertise. He worked at Blizzard for 7 years. He has experience in the game developer world, and he has a different point of view. And to say that he did not research it, he did. That's why he's showing us the video. This is the information that was out. He showcased the Stop Killing Games initiative. Just got here. Could I have a quick summary of the drama so far? We're talking about the PirateSoftware Stop Killing Games drama, the initiative that he spoke out against. They showed up. We're going to be seeing the most recent video put out by Ross, where he covers this and pretty much attributes a lot of the impact to the drying up of signatures to Pirate's videos about it, how he misrepresented the cause, things like that. Point being, the fall of the 11th. Just because he's wrong, that doesn't mean that it's maliciously wrong. How can he have the opinions he has when his chat and so many people have called him out on this before, as well as other things? This is routine behavior from him. It's routine, but that doesn't mean it's lying. It could just mean that he has a very fragile ego and he's not willing to give up those beliefs. He could truly believe them, and people pushing against that is only going to reinstate and reaffirm those beliefs. Again, I'm not saying that he's right. I'm not saying he's correct, but to prove that he is maliciously lying about these things would take an extra degree of evidence that just doesn't make sense, even given like his pattern of behavior. Like, he had issues with OnlyFans with accepting that he screwed up. He had issues with the copyright thing, where they were like, they're going to go after copyrighting this guy's game. I interviewed an actual lawyer that covers free speech and defamation, and he showed, no, this guy was wrong. PirateSoftware was wrong. You cannot get away with doing this, or at the very least, there is a very strong argument against the points that they were trying to make. So it's not about that. And if he's going to talk about it so confidently, again, we can look at ego. We can look at the other reasons that people would, be wrong about that. It is lying when you've been told definitively with evidence that you're wrong and refuse to speak with the people he misrepresented. It is when he goes and starts blocking people for correcting him. So blocking people doesn't mean that you're lying. It means that you don't want to listen to those people, or that you don't want to see what they're posting. You're making a lot of jumps in your logic that do not actually connect to your argument. if you have evidence, like if you can start at the rudimentary like ground level example that he is lying, and you can show proof of him knowingly lying, or just proof of him just lying as opposed to misunderstanding, then we can go that direction. But like as it stands right now, every point that you've brought up to me has just been like logical fallacy of, well, everyone else is saying that he's lying and things like that, when that's not the case. I mean, again, I have to look at this objectively, whether I agree with you or not. Going off of what has been released so far, I can't just directly indicate or like know that he is lying intentionally. I always got the fragile ego vibe from him when every video of this I saw was just, look at how smart I am, look at how humble I am, look how kind I am. It's narcissism. It's definitely playing maybe an aspect. I think a really good example, maybe this would even help for you, the fall of 11th, is if you take a look at the Healthy Gamers GG interview that he had with him like a month ago. That was really telling of how he kind of processes and deals through and works through things. And refused to even speak with the founder of the movement. I know, I messaged Pirate directly and asked if he would have a conversation with the guy. I'm firmly aware that does not mean lying, though. The evidence is right in front of you. He was told by the founder of the movement that he's wrong, was shown evidence he misrepresented it, and then instead of correcting it, doubled down. He could still think he's right. That doesn't mean malice. No. We're gonna move on. I still got a video to record here that we're going through. Vehemently, I disagree with you. I'm not following your logic, but you're allowed to think the thoughts that you do. I respect you for it. I could be wrong too.
That's really different here. If we don't like the idea of live service games as a whole, I get it. Don't play live service games then. Don't agree to those terms. But if we're under this weird idea that we need to get
so what is this
rid of,
It falls in line with other consumer practices. You know how when you buy something, you're generally allowed to keep it?
In the case of live service games, in the terms of service for those, you are not buying the game. You're buying a license to the game. And that's the part that's really different here. If we don't like the idea of live service games as a whole, I get it. Don't play live service games then. Don't agree to those terms. But if we're under this weird idea that
Okay, so right here, this thing. Okay, hold on. It's not malicious so much as it's curation of the outcome he wants, because he specifically doesn't interact with Ross. You can't say it's inherently malicious. So the fall of the 11th, it is, and that's fair if you don't follow the logic. But this comes off as a lot of making excuses for Pirate. Oh, he's not malicious, or oh, he's not lying. So how many chances did Pirate get? How many times are we going to go down this route with Pirate doing this type of behavior? Again, you can. So fall of the 11th. I'm not saying go watch him. I'm not saying he's a good guy. I'm saying that the argument you're making is not logical. Like at an objective level, the arguments that you presented, all of them so far have been logical fallacies or things that you cannot prove. It's not saying that what you're saying isn't true. It's just saying that your argument for it is not correct. Like at a fundamental level. That's just English. Like that's just how conversations and logic functions. So when we're talking about, oh, it's not malicious, oh, he's not lying, I'm not giving him excuses. I'm giving a defense and showcasing why those arguments don't work. That's just why all logical fallacies don't work. There's a reason why they are a logical fallacy. But in the same way that we're talking about how I'm saying, or like also Mothman has just brought up, it's not malicious so much as it's the curation of the outcome. So we're making an argument. We see it as such. And you are saying that that's not true. Even though I'm presenting you evidence that you are presenting logical fallacies, you are still choosing not to accept that. And you're still saying that it is lying, that it is these things. If we look at it like that, we are both, you're doing the exact same thing that PirateSoftware is doing. You are rejecting the points that I'm making and calling out about, you using logical fallacies. You're not recognizing that. You're just moving on and saying I'm not correct. That is the exact same thing that Pirate's doing in this situation. But you're not being malicious about it. I don't think you're being malicious. I have no reason to believe that you're choosing to ignore what I'm saying, or that you know that what I'm saying is true and you're choosing to lie about it. I just think that you disagree with me. So that's what I mean, right? And again, I'm not comparing you to Pirate because I don't like you or something like that. That's not the point at all. But that's kind of what we're doing right now. So So according to you, him knowingly spreading false information and doubling down on it while refusing to speak with people he's misrepresenting is not malicious. That's where we disagree. I said I don't think he's knowingly spreading false information. I never said that I thought he was. Lying or slandering is not the right words to describe this troublesome. Your argument is inherently biased with your emotional attachment. You're manipulating the situation is lying far more. So, okay, so there's another one. So you're saying, according to him, according to you, him knowingly spreading false information, that's a straw man. We're kind of hitting every single logical fallacy with you. That's a straw man. I never made that argument. So you're arguing something that does not exist. I never made that point. Yes, it's just miscommunication. The difference is the situation, in my opinion, is based on several instances of Pirate being caught doing this and doubling down. Again, I just need proof of that. If you have proof of that, I'd love to see it. You showed me the Actman's tweet. If you can show me proof of him knowingly lying, we're totally good. I think his license argument is ironic. I generally, it's a government that issues licenses or at least oversees the issuing. Why would software devs be exempt? Yes. So this is the thing I wanted to talk about. I paused because I wanted to chat with you guys a bit more. So we're talking about right here. So when we're looking at the reasons, the ECL, so him talking about the licensing, right? So if you go to buy a car and you're not buying it flat out, do they tell you, do they look at you and go, hey, you could buy this car for $99? No. No, they tell you can lease the car. You can lease the car for $99 a month. But you bet your sweet bippy if they told you, hey, you know, we've got if they had the opportunity, they legally can't. They legally can't say we're selling you the car for $99 because that's not true. Even if it's in the terms of the purchase, even if what you're signing says, hey, you're going to be paying $99 a month until you fully paid off this balance. Even if that's true in the terms of service, they are legally obligated to say we are leasing the car. They'd love to just say that you're flat out buying the car for $99 and then check the terms of service and it's every month. So if they're held to that standard, if they have to say at, you know, time of purchase, you would be leasing the car for that much money a month, then you would think that the obligation for games is, hey, if you don't own this until, you know, this requirement is met, then that is leasing, or you are purchasing a license that can be taken away at any moment. That should be made abundantly clear as you go in to make that purchase. And if it isn't, we could go down the route of, well, it's not looking very good here. You know, that's obfuscating the truth of it. And that hasn't been legal, you know, contractual. Well, no, I'm thinking of something different. I'm obfuscating a bit there. Ignore that last part. But, you know, that's entering a treacherous territory of the legality of, you know, are you being deceitful in setting up your license and setting up your terms of service to convince people that they are purchasing something that they are not? And I'm talking about this like I know much about it. I'm not a lawyer, right? Damn Son says the movement, whatever the specifics, encourages more regulation on developers. He is a developer. Of course, he's against it. I think it's a very, very simple way to look at it. I think it also is kind of true because he talks a lot about this functional playable state not being possible. But we're going to get more into that as we continue. So you've seen the evidence of him lying. You can't say someone is not being. So I've not seen evidence of him lying. Again, that is another straw man. I told you there is evidence of him misunderstanding or misrepresenting the goals of the initiative. But he has given no indication that he was lying about it. Lying is like, I know that this isn't true and I'm saying it anyways. That is not the case. That is not what I've seen. I never said that. If the ability to learn the actual information on something is given to you and you openly refuse while spreading more false information, that's just malicious. That's how myself and many see it. If you misunderstand something and you propagate that as truth, that doesn't make you a liar. You would have to intentionally be not telling the truth. People say, oh, he's lying about this. Well, that's not technically the right word to use. That was actually brought up by someone else in chat. Again, that is not proof of that. You can make that logical jump, but for the sake of me trying to look at this on both sides and be just like, let's just look at what we have in front of us, I can't make that claim because it's logically does not match up. It's not true. The crux of the issue is that the way he presented his position wasn't to say I'm against it because it cuts into my bottom line. It was to paint SKG negatively to elevate their position. Yeah. There we go again. He knew it wasn't true because the founder told him. Thousands told him. They told him their argument against his, and he doesn't believe it. That's not the same thing as lying. Again, it literally does. Lol. Intention doesn't negate the actions. Yes, it does. That's why we have manslaughter and why we have murder. Manslaughter exists because if the intention isn't to kill the person, then it follows a different set of law. You get a different sentence based on your intention. That is flagrantly untrue. Like, this is what I mean, right? We've gone through like 4 or 5 points that you've made, and you've strawmanned me like 3 times now. I'm not saying this is disingenuous, but this is starting to feel moot, like to discuss with you. You clearly have your thoughts. I don't think you're going to change my mind because you have yet to bring me something like with like legitimate logic to it. So I think we're just going to agree to disagree and move on here. This is starting to feel like an excuse. No, if you look back, I fully outline what a straw man is. I tell you what a straw man is and I show you doing it. And you did it like, it was 2 or 3 times now. We'll be safe and say 2. Oh, that's really funny. Okay.
We need to get rid of all live service games or damage that practice in any way to keep in line with consumer policies. It is in line with consumer policies. If it wasn't, it wouldn't be there in the first place. So this doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. You're not buying the game, you're buying a license to the game. In the niche cases where a studio is trying to sell a game as if you are buying it or purchasing it or using that language specifically and they give you a live service game instead, I agree that should change. That language should change. You are not purchasing the game. You are not buying the game. You are paying to have a license to a live service experience.
I really like that argument. That is like genuinely, that is my favorite argument that he has made. I think he's going to end up turning it into something else, but as it stands, like just on its own, if we look at it, I think he's going to get into it and kind of make it, I disagree with him with how he further propagates it. But he starts it out by going, we should talk about that because if you go to purchase like one of these only online games, like on Steam, it's just purchase. Like it, you know, the licensing part of it, it's in the terms of service and stuff that nobody actually reads. So I agree with Pirate on that. We should also focus on the verbiage, which is what we were discussing earlier with the car example, right? You should know that it is a license and you should be fully aware of what that means when you are going in to like purchase a license. You're not purchasing the game, you're purchasing a license. I completely agree with that point.
Get that. Is that what this is doing though? The initiative is not trying to call that out specifically. It's trying to say that all games need to stay in a functional, playable state, which is not calling out the language that is being used to manipulate the player. Call that out specifically. Not.
So he wants them instead of narrowing it down and making the argument to, be about leaving them in a functional, playable state. He wants it to be about the verbiage. He wants it to be about the specific words that they're using. Again, that is Pirate's preference. It's not the goal of the initiative. And you can kind of start to see how he keeps kind of it seems you can make the assessment that he is assuming that the initiative is standing for something that it does not. And he keeps kind of like bringing it back to that when it's just, I think it's just what he wants the initiative to be about, if that makes sense.
This vague bullshit.
And finally, this is a diversion from really serious topics that politicians would prefer not to deal with.
That's really gross to me as well. The idea that this is just a diversion from serious topics and they can get an easy win in and we can just push it through and there won't be a lot of pushback on it and they're not going to have to think about it too hard. That's crazy dangerous, dude. If you're going to be setting precedent, if you're going to be putting forward something that you want to start a conversation to eventually become legislation, and these are the reasons for it, not only can I not agree with the initiative, but I can't agree with you. And I think that the tactics that you're using here are really disgusting. So yes, I won't agree with that. And I won't agree with Ross. There's no way around that. I think this is gross. To sum it all up, no, I will not be supporting the initiative Stop Killing Games. You're not going to change my mind on it because I find this language to be incredibly vague and damaging to the rest of our industry. I think that it would...
Okay, so he thinks that the way that the initiative is set up, it is damaging to the industry and it is vague. It is too vague and it's not covering what he thinks and it's not being specific enough to actually do something useful, and in fact, it could be damaging. Right?
Be bad for both developers and players down the line in the way that it is currently written. And I think that starting a conversation that doesn't get to the core of the issue is both wasted time and leads to potentially bad outcomes. So If we want to talk about this, let's talk about the actual bad business practices. In the case that a studio is making a live service game and they sell it to you as a product, they say that you are purchasing the game or you are buying the game, when in reality you're actually purchasing or buying a license to that game. I think that we should be fighting about that. That needs to go away. A player should be well informed at the point of purchase that they are purchasing a license, not buying a game. And the reason that we have those licenses in the case of client-server interactions, like we had before, we're talking about client-server games, is so that they can ban you when you cheat at them. They revoke.
Okay. So they're calling out the point. Hold on. Hold on. I'm skipping an ad just so I can do this. Pirate did actually attempt a DMCA takedown of an indie Steam game because the dev made a bait post on Reddit implying that he'd add a parody version of Pirate into the game. How's that not malicious? Well, the fall of the 11th. I'm going to give you this one. I'm going to give you this one opportunity here. So if you take a look at my channel here, let's go. I think I'll just make another YouTube link here. Let's do this.
For that.
Go here. Let's go to my channel. Let's go to my videos. Okay. So down here, when that drama was happening, here we go. I actually have a 56-minute video where I talk with a lawyer, the lawyer who represented that indie developer, and we go fully in depth talking about this exact thing. So yes, I'm firmly aware we can prove that it's not malicious, and I talked to the lawyer that would have represented him had it gone to court. So I know that it's not malicious, and we go in depth. I urge you to check out this full video so you can get that full in-depth, explanation, not just from me, but from a fucking lawyer. Again, I don't dislike you, but at this point, it's very clear that you are not actually interested in having an actual discussion. You just want people on your side, and you're not willing to just kind of like look at it in the same way that we're trying to look at it to dissect it. So yeah. It was really funny that he brought up that argument specifically because I even referenced it earlier. But I highly encourage you to check out this video. But let's get back to it. Where were we at? Okay, we're almost at the end of this one.
Revoke your license per product. They say that you are purchasing the game or you are buying the game, when in reality you're actually purchasing or buying a license to that game. I think that we should be fighting about that. That needs to go away. A player should be well informed at the point of purchase that they are purchasing a license, not buying a game. And the reason that we have those...
Hell yeah. I think like truly everyone, correct me if I'm wrong, I think we could all agree with that. We don't want to, be tricked into buying something that we will not get to own down the road. We'd like to know that at the front end of it.
Licenses in the case of client-server interactions, like we had before, we're talking about client-server games, is so that they can ban you when you cheat at them. They revoke your license. That's why they revoke your license, to protect the gameplay of every other player that you're impacting when you cheat at these games. That needs to exist, but it needs...
So from what I understand, even in old Call of Duties, or like old games like that, which you can still run the single-player campaigns of, the way that it would work out... The way that it would work out is they could still ban you. If you were cheating in those games, they still had a clause in effect where you would get banned. You don't need to walk away from this license thing. Like, you don't need to completely remove that opportunity to still include like a clause in your game that, hey, we can still remove you from online play if you're being a stinky butt, So I think that's useful. But there we go. Pirate could have really ironed out. So weird because I feel like they could have teamed up and Pirate could have really ironed out some of the details if he cared. Yeah, and I would recommend. Well, the video's out. This is wrapping up. The last thing is, yeah. So if you check out the video that I'm going to put out about this, I'll have a link to my my proposal in trying to get Pirate to have a conversation with Ross.
To be better informed to the player at time of purchase. So I agree on that. This doesn't bring that up though. It just attacks all video games that have online only components and says that they need to keep being able to be played indefinitely. That doesn't make any sense to me. Aside from that,
yeah.
A lot of people really like live service games. as they exist now. So trying to kill off all live service games, as some people have said online, doesn't make any sense either. Live service games are a great way to get away from the real world. They are about social interaction between players. Some people get married in them. Some people met their spouse in them and then got married in them. It's a really cool thing for a point in time in which you're having that social experience. And to destroy that just because you don't like them is very weird. I don't think that makes a lot of sense to me. I also don't think it makes sense the way that Ross is posing this as why it's going to pass. I think that's incredibly inflammatory and could lead to a lot of damage to both what he's trying to stop and to games as a whole. To say that the government just doesn't care and this is an easy win and we're going to get it through is disingenuous. You're talking about a
Okay, I gotta replay that back. I'm so sorry. I didn't realize it was not showing.
Service games, as some people have said online. Games
Did you guys hear it?
Have online-only components, and says that they need to keep being able to be played indefinitely. That doesn't make any sense to me. Aside from that, a lot of people really like live service games as they exist now. So trying to kill off all live service games, as some people have said online, doesn't make any sense either. Live service games are a great way to get away from the real world. They are about social interaction between players. Some people get married in them. Some people met their spouse in them and then got married in them. It's a really cool thing for a point in time in which you're having that social experience. And to destroy that just because you don't like them is very weird. I don't think that makes a lot of sense to me. I also don't think it makes sense the way that Ross is posing this as why it's going to pass. I think that's incredibly inflammatory and could lead to a lot of damage to both what he's trying to stop and to games as a whole. To say that the government just doesn't care and this is an easy win and we're going to get it through is disingenuous. You're talking about a multi-billion-dollar global industry. To think that the government isn't going to be meticulously looking through this and looking for flaws and holes is absurd. So I don't think that's honest at all, and I find it disgusting. So for everyone who's mad about that, fine. Be angry about it. I'm not going to change my stance on that because I can't agree with this, both as a dev and a player. I see the danger involved, I see the vagueness in the language, and it doesn't make sense to me. If we want to fight for better conditions for players, then fight the actual problem. Don't make new ones.
Okay. So there we go. That's kind of how it wraps up. Again, he reiterates a lot of the stuff that we were talking about at the end, and it's a very clear, again, misunderstanding of the main objective of the game and main objective of the cause, the stop killing games. He's focused on how it's going to affect online games. He even said that, you're doing this because you're essentially killing off live service games because you don't like them, which was, again, never stated, was never brought up. That is, you can argue that is a straw man, because it does not exist. That was not an argument that was made. That was an argument that he presented himself. I got my own opinion of old COD games. They've been killed because they don't ban the hackers anymore after a certain point, and the online experience turns into malware with how bad it is. That's very interesting. A really good example of how players have worked around that because they have shut off, that ability is Plutonium. There's a service called Plutonium. I love MW3. MW3 was the first Call of Duty game I ever played. And they have MW3, it's Plutonium, or it's really close to that. I'm pretty sure it's that, as well as Black Ops 2 Plutonium, which is essentially their own set of servers that they run, and they have their own anti-cheat, and it's run for players. It's free. You're able to just download it and then play the games and not have to deal with those hackers. And so they have an active banning system where they go through that. They'll do player bans, things like that. And so that's a way to help solve that issue, and it allows us to do that. And apparently it was illegal. It got shut down at one point because it's illegal. But at that point, if you're just running the games and they're not even supporting them, what's the goal? And that's kind of my opinion. It's like, well, if you already accepted you're not making money, you're not servicing the game anymore, just let people play the damn game. If it wasn't for Activision attacking the projects that try to preserve the old experience like the predecessors to Plutonium. Exactly. But moving back onto the main point. So we covered that video. And then he also made a second video. It's half as long. We'll get through it, I think, pretty quick. But let's also cover that because I think it's important. And then we're going to cover Ross's response that had just come through. Let's get started with this.
Video called Stop Killing Games, saying why I would not support the initiative. Overall, it was actually quite positive. The analytics on it show that people really think it's a good idea. There's a huge amount of like ratio, and I received hundreds of comments from developers thanking me for putting it out because they can't speak publicly while they're at a business or a job elsewhere. A lot of the times, major companies will fire you if you are speaking out of turn and cause a PR disaster for those companies. And since this is such a popular thing among players, most devs aren't going to say anything to you. So I am. So let's discuss the most common requirement of the initiative, which is game.
Okay, yeah. Let's move back to normal.
Games have to be left in a functional, playable state. Now, what happens if that game is a online-only live service game? Well, if you want that to stay in a functional, playable state, that means the devs have to release either server binaries or somehow carve off the game to be a single-player experience now. Some way.
Okay, so again, and I know I keep reiterating the points. It's not to like dodge a copyright claim or something. I want to make it clear, especially in the video I'm making, the points that he's making, so that when we're in the future, when we're discussing them, I want to make it very clear that these arguments that are going to be counterpointed were in his video, and that these were the exact things that he was saying, because I don't want it to be misrepresented that I'm trying to take it in a different way, or that the viewers of my video are going to walk away with an opinion that is short-sighted, because we have turned around. We are watching through all of his videos like he asked, as well as the Louis Rossmann video, which we're going to check out as well, that covers this, and make sure that we're only going to be talking about and refuting points that are made in his videos, right? That was his big issue, and I want to focus on that.
To keep it functional and play.
Amazing stream. You're extremely underrated, by the way. I usually hate watching streams. This is just crazy. Thank you very much. I just need to be more consistent.
You want that to stay in a functional, playable state. That means the devs have to release either server binaries or somehow carve off the game to be a single-player experience now.
So the two things are, he's saying, if you want to have a live service game operable and usable like this, your two options are carving off the game to be a single player experience. Now I'm interested to hear how he's going to explain that further. I'm pretty sure he does. Or you give up the server binaries.
Have to release either server binaries or somehow carve off.
And I'm not a developer, so let's figure out what those server binaries are too.
The game to be a single player experience now. Some way to keep it functional and playable, right? Now, many of you are requesting, yes, I should get the server binaries so that I can go and make private servers for this. But that doesn't make a lot of sense in the real world. And the reason why is because it leaves developers open to abuse. So let's explore that a little bit. Let's say that you made your own video game and you made a live service game. Maybe it's an MMO, maybe it's something else, right? And let's say that I want to monetize that game, but you don't allow monetization of the game by any other party. This makes sense because most creators don't allow for that. You can't just take someone else's art and profit off of it. Normal, right? So then I go, well, how am I going to force you to do this? Under this initiative, you would have to release the server binaries or keep the game in a functional, playable state at end of life. So I hit you with a ton of bots. I hit you with a ton of exploits. I attack your community. I destroy your Reddit. I go after your business. I go everywhere that I possibly can to make this cost as much as it possibly can for you. And it's not hard to do this. We saw the exact same thing happen in TF2 recently. The massive amount of bots that were attacking the game. This is not infeasible. This is something that is very easily attainable today. And let's say that this goes on long enough that your game dies because you can't afford it anymore and your studio has to shut down. At end of life, you now have to release those server binaries to keep the game in a functional, playable state. At which point I take those, I create a private server, and I monetize it. And some people have said, well, simply don't allow monetization of the server. Well, who's going to enforce that? If you want a government initiative to enforce that, that means the government has to build a registry of all of those games and all of that intellectual property that shouldn't be monetized, and then somehow enforce that with no one owning it because those studios have shut down. That's going to be a massive burden. On top of that, if you want to go the other route and say the company has to go and control it, well, what if the company's not around anymore? Is that just able to be monetized now? Again, this was obtained through abuse of the original creator. I don't think that's a good route. And this scenario...
So in this hypothetical situation, yeah, that'd be a big bummer. Maliciously, people are doing this, and they create their own private servers and monetize it. At that point, I'd be interested because bots, exploits, all that would run the community into the ground. So what kind of community would you have around this monetized server? Not a very large one. But again, they're still profiting off of it. Sure, that's still a legitimate issue. So bots, exploits, community. So in this scenario that he's specifically talking about, which, kind of happened to TF2, but they bounced back because there was a response from Valve. So even then, it's just an example that people like bot farmed the shit out of it. Also similar to RuneScape. That would be a massive headache. And also figuring out the registry. Well, from my understanding, if you own the copyright to something, like the copyright for, let's see, Mickey Mouse with Disney, that there is a registry for that. It's the copyright one. And if you copyright parts of your game or like the game itself, then there already is a registry for that. And if you can prove that someone is exploiting that copyright, then you have a copyright lawsuit. Then you have a legal means to take those funds back. From how I understand it, maybe it is different with gaming. Maybe the copyright is different. But in the same way that like we saw the Mickey Mouse IP from the Steamboat Willie era lapsed, and people were able to make art with the Steamboat Willie. People were able to monetize off that because that's how copyright works. It is not just this indefinite, immoral, don't use somebody's art to profit off of it. If the copyright expires and you don't renew it because you don't have the funds for that, yeah, it is not yours anymore by law. Like morally good or bad, that's the case. So at that point, if you can't fund it, if this happened to you in your community, that sucks and it's a terrible thing. But if we're looking at it from a legal standpoint, then yes, you can just make money off of that. And it would be a tough situation. And that is frustrating. Do not get me wrong. But we're also just hearing him out and listening to this hypothetical that he's presented.
It gets even worse if you do allow monetization, because now I can just kill off your company and then monetize the server and no one will ever come after me. Now it's even more of a problem. So allowing monetization of this work is strictly worse. And for those of you out there that say, oh, this can be done right now, I could just destroy your studio and take your stuff anyway. You could, but this allows a route for it to be legal to do so. That's the problem. After putting this out publicly and talking to people about it, this
does not allow you to legally do this. Doing these bots, exploiting, ruining the community, like setting up bots, that's not legal. Never has been, and the initiative is not supporting that to be legal. What he's talking about is at the end of the game's life, whether it's artificially done or like manually done by this, hypothetical evil person, brigading and ripping this down. Number one, doing so would be illegal. But if that is already done, or if it has already, passed its prime and they're shutting it down, you would be able to monetize off it. And that's the legal route, being that it would just, I think the point he's making is that doing this legally or making this legal, the way that the Stop Killing Games initiative would have it work out is that it would be easier to do something that is illegal. It would be easier to do that. Not just flat out legal. Maybe I'm reading that incorrectly, but that's from what I understand from what he's saying.
Specific scenario on both YouTube and Discord and Reddit and a bunch of other locations. I got a couple of takes back. We're going to start with the most extreme position and kind of go from there. So in the most extreme, people said live service games shouldn't exist at all, and the initiative will kill them off for good, and that's a good thing. We'll start on both YouTube and Discord and Reddit and a bunch of other locations. I got a couple of takes back. We're going to start with the most extreme position and kind of go from there. So in the most extreme, people said live service games shouldn't exist at all, and the initiative will kill them off for good, and that's a good thing. Well, you don't get to define what players get to play or not play. You also shouldn't be able to get to define what developers build or don't build. You should not have creative control over the developers, and you should not have control over what is in my Steam library or on my phone. That doesn't make any goddamn sense.
I think, personally, he's saying it doesn't make sense because that's, you shouldn't be able to have that control. For me, hearing that sounds insane. Because how does that work? The Stop Killing Games initiative does not, and in no way is trying to get rid of live service games. That's why it seems insane to me. The people that are thinking that are also dumb if they think that it would just kill off live service games. That's where I disagree. That's where Thor and I disagree. He's saying that innately, based on leaving them in a functional, playable state, that would kill the games, and that doesn't click for me. That doesn't make sense based off of what I'm seeing.
Aside from that, the initiative...
But that is the argument that he's making.
Does not purport to kill live service games. It would just make it incredibly difficult to build said games and add a lot of risk to it, which is why I'm bringing all of this up and why I don't support the initiative in the first place. A lot of people don't realize that this will slowly diminish live service games in the market because it's not an incentive for us to build them anymore, which means you get...
So he's saying that this initiative removes the incentive and that it is also just not true.
Live service games in the market because...
And he's also saying that it will diminish live service games in the market. He is making a prediction and saying it as though it is going to be what happens based off this presup of what this would do. This presupposition. You say, Mothman, that's an explicit fallacy in his logic there. I'm pretty sure he's aware, but refuses to acknowledge or retract. How do you know that he's aware of the fallacy? How do you know that he's aware of that? Because I've seen him do it. I've seen him make logical, like, I've made logical fallacies all the time, but I only notice when I stop and look at them afterwards. Usually I'm not thinking about it when I'm making them. But continuing on.
Because it's not an incentive for us to build them anymore, which means you get less multiplayer live experiences. That sucks. I like live service games. I enjoy playing things like Final Fantasy XIV. I enjoy going and playing in games in the past, at least, like League of Legends. These are games that are live service. They require a live service to run. And you shouldn't be able to take that away from people. And if that's your only position on this, not only are you disingenuous in what the initiative is purporting to try and achieve, but you're also aggressively attacking other players instead of trying to fix something. So the next one is that this is about games preservation, and that it needs to happen to preserve these types of games for future generations and for everyone to always have forever. But I would argue that this isn't actually preserving these games. Social games, such as, let's say, Apex Legends, require a number of players to be in the match at the same time so that you can have an experience that is only able to be obtained through lots of players interacting, right? It's a multiplayer game. You need a bunch of people. How many of you have felt negatively when an MMO dies or when a live service game dies? Oh, dead game. There's only 5 people online. Why would I play that? So why would you want to preserve a game in that state? That doesn't make any sense to me. You want to...
So what he's saying here, it doesn't make sense why you'd want to preserve a game where the main or the best experience that you could have on it is if it was fully multiplayer and, you know, alive like it is, like World of Warcraft or Apex Legends is what he brings up. Think about like Fortnite. You know, you're never going to have that if the game's dead and they're hitting the kill switch. Even if you have the game, you'll never have, you know, 100-player lobbies. You'll never have that full amount of people showing up. So what's the goal? And I think, again, that's an issue of what he was just saying. It's like, you have no right to, you know, choose what's in my library. You should have no right to demolish live service games just because you don't like them. Well, in that, if we're using that same logic, Pirate or Thor here does not have the right to tell me that because he wouldn't enjoy the game or because the experience of the game would be different if you left it in a functional playable state where you don't have the same player counts, just because he thinks that that is lame or he doesn't like it, that doesn't mean that he gets the right to say that that shouldn't happen, that I shouldn't have the opportunity to play that game and to use it on my own volition, even after that multiplayer aspect is long gone. Maybe I just like building in Fortnite. Maybe I'm just weird. It's not up to you to decide that for me. So it's kind of like we can immediately use the logic that he just brought up to counter the argument that he presents right after it. There's an explicit fallacy in his logic there. There we go. Good point. He could just be shooting from the hip, but his recent responses to this position make me feel like he's having to defend himself rather than be able to explain it, rather than being able to explain. Agreed. I think he's like, his back's up against a wall. And when he's got his back up against the wall, he's more focused on defending himself than making sense, which he's done in the past too, like with the OnlyFang stuff. Sounds like his logic goes, because Z is possible, then Z will always be the result. He's ignoring the rest of the possibilities. Ninja, you hit it on the head. It's really funny you say that because Ross is going to say the exact same thing when we show his video. The problem is that it was designed this way. Those games should be free and generally are. Right. Should be free and generally. The problem is that this is it was designed that way. This game should be free and generally are. Well, fun fact. The Stop Killing Games initiative does not mind free games. If a free game gets is closed down, that's okay. They don't need to continue it because that was not a purchase made. That was not a product that you own. It was free. So in the sense that it is free, that's kind of like going above and beyond what is a free to play game, right? So they don't have an issue with free games. Like this, the Stop Killing Games initiative is not targeting free games. And they're actually going out of their way to clarify that those are not a part of this. So yeah. Sorry, just got to check here. Okay, there we go. There we go. Oh, wow. I just got an email back from Ross. Okay, hold on, hold on. Okay, okay. Well, here. Are you... Okay, I just need to take a quick pause here to respond to him here. Okay, very cool. I'm just gonna say, in essence, he was saying that he was willing to have the conversation with Pirate Software. He goes into more detail about some of the other stuff, but I'll hold off on that until I get his explicit approval to talk about what was in his email. Okay, let's continue on though. The problem is that it was designed that way. Oh yeah, okay, perfect.
To take down these live service games, put them up on a private server, and then play it with a couple of people. You're not bringing it back at its height. You're not taking a snapshot of what the game actually is. You're making it limp on in a way that doesn't make any sense. That's not preservation. And for those that may stop...
Again, making it limp on in a way that doesn't make sense is completely his own opinion on how people choose to enjoy those games. But from a developer point of view, maybe he's got a good point. Maybe the vast majority of people wouldn't even want to play that game in this functional, playable state, especially with these online multiplayer games, unless they have the opportunity to host their own servers and, have a group of friends that like to play that game.
Stop there and go, but private server's going to have a lot of players. Look at all the ones for World of Warcraft. Again, we talked about that. It opens up a route for abuse to the developers, so that is not a solution. And the last take that I got...
So again, just because there is abuse doesn't mean that abuse is always going to be the thing that takes place, right? A limping game missing a lot of content is better than no game. Little Big Planet is a great example. That's a great point, Cam. Great point, Cam Nuggets. Yeah, it's still you still own it, and you still have access to that game. And I think that's what matters the most if you're purchasing it under the pretense that you will get to own it.
Got from this is, and it's the most reasonable to me, this is an initiative. It's not a law. Why are you upset? Just wait. I'm not going to wait. And the reason I'm not going to wait is because I see the start of this conversation not making sense. It's not including the actual developer side of the conversation. It's not showing the trials and problems that this could arise inside of the gaming industry for people who are actually making the games you play. I don't have any reason to be quiet about that. And
well, I guess I would argue, don't you think that if the developer side of the conversation is not included in this initiative, that maybe having a conversation with the leader of this initiative, that being Ross, don't you think that as a developer that would be useful to have that discussion, to include the point of view of a developer? Because as it stands right now, because Pirate Software has not been willing to have that conversation, that's where it kind of gets tough, right?
Many other developers aren't going to be able to speak on this. As I explained before, it's really easy to lose your job if you're working at a major studio and try to speak out of turn on something like this, especially with something people are so passionate about. Doesn't make any sense to stay quiet. And it also doesn't make any sense to wait until it's in a different form when I see that it has so many problems with the language as it is currently written. I should be able to be talking about this. In fact, I should be talking about this. I am a content creator specifically that is a game developer that has worked in this industry for 20 years. This is my wheelhouse. This is what I do. So for those who are calling for me to just be silent and sit in the corner, No. With all of that being said, I do think there's a consumer protection thing that we can fix here. It's just not really what the initiative is about. I think that if you're going to buy a live service game, you shouldn't be told you're buying the game. You shouldn't be told that you're purchasing the game. You should be told explicitly that you are purchasing a license to that game. The reason why is because that license needs to be revoked anytime that you are cheating at the game and damaging the play experience of other players. While this is written in the TOS and the EULA, it's usually not clearly defined at point of sale. Or they throw a giant TOS in front of you and it doesn't really do anything because people skip past it. If at point of sale it says specifically, there's specific language stating that you are either leasing or purchasing a license or anything along those lines, that you're not actually buying the game directly, I think it would go a long way to informing consumers of what they're doing and protect them from some of these business practices that they didn't realize they were engaging in.
Bars. Agreed. We should absolutely have that conversation. I think it should be a part of the Stop Killing Games initiative. I 1,000,000% agree with that. We should not be cool with deceptive business practices or things that are not clear and very well known at the point of sale, like you said. I think everyone could agree with that.
That makes a lot more sense to me than force all developers to leave the game in a functional, playable state. And that's about it. That's all I really wanted to talk about with this. I hope that's clarified some things for some of you and some of the dangers that this can cause as it is currently written. If you're still mad about this, not much I can do about it. Outside of that, I'm going to be gone for the next 4 days, so if you expect me to respond or anything like that and you think I'm ducking the issue or hiding in some way, I'm not. I'm just in Vegas because there's DEF CON going on, which is a hacking convention, and it's the first vacation I've had.
Okay, so he's not ducking, he's just busy, just doing life, right? So there we go. So we went through both of them. I think we've accurately kind of covered all the points that we needed to cover. Now let's jump over to this third video that he wanted us to watch. And then after that, we're going to get into the responses. Okay. Well, before we do that, I'm going to stop and take my dog out momentarily because I think he's got to poop. So here's some bopping music. And I'll be right back. All right, I'm back. There we go. Okay. What's back in? All right, it's funny because a lot of the new games coming out, no one even wants to own. They just want a refund. Yeah. It's wild that Thor is the same person who took on flack for having an interview with Asmongold about his favorite early access MMO because he wants it to succeed. Meanwhile, he's doing this. Yeah, it's, I don't know, man. It's weird. Sorry, it is raining outside. If I look wet, I can't tell. Okay, so back to where we were. Let's get into it. So the last one that PirateSoftware suggests people check out, actually, oh, never mind. He doesn't actually include that one anymore. That was in an original tweet that he changed, so we won't look at the Lewis Rossman one. He's not asking us to check that out. I think it's just going to be more fluff, so ignore that. We'll just move on to the video responding to PirateSoftware. So kind of responding, just kind of calling it out. This is Ross's final attempt to bring Stop Killing Games back. So let's actually look at Stop Killing Games. There we go. So if we take a look here, this is the Stop Killing Games initiative. I will keep myself over here. This is the Stop Killing Games. So we're at 560K. So before I think it was at like 450 something. So they've gotten another 100,000 signatures, which is pretty big. But this is the video that he put out, and we're specifically going to jump over into him talking about PirateSoftware. I'll leave a link in the description to this entire video, but we're gonna start with this here, yeah. So you talked about, I mean, we're just gonna get into it, actually.
I really don't want to do this next part, but it's become a liability for the campaign for me not to. Our biggest critic by far is YouTuber and streamer PirateSoftware, who goes by Thor. If your only exposure to Stop Killing Games has been this video, then you've been misinformed. This video is by someone who does not understand the campaign, has been trying to stop it, and has been making up what it is about. I am not saying that lightly. I will prove it in a minute. Now you might be thinking, okay, so some YouTuber got something wrong on the internet. So what? See, that was my thinking too. The problem is how incredibly influential this YouTuber has been. Remember that list of coverage on the campaign? Well, best I can tell, Thor's coverage has been bigger than literally anyone else on those lists, except Asmongold. And the only video Asmongold had on this bigger than Thor's was about Thor's video. So for all practical purposes, Thor here has been the #1 voice on the campaign, and he's been lying about what it is. That's a bit loaded though. In this case, I'm using the...
So making a pretty big claim here. He's saying, and this is interesting. What was that gentleman's name that was here earlier? The Fall of the 11th. So Fall of the 11th is saying that this guy was making the claim that this guy was lying, right? That PirateSoftware was lying, okay?
Lying is Thor here.
So now Ross is saying that Thor has been the #1 voice in the campaign.
Has been the #1 voice on the campaign, and he's been lying about what it is.
That's a pretty bold claim. Let's see what he says.
That's a bit loaded though. In this case, I'm using the second definition of lie.
To create a false or misleading impression. So maybe, admittedly, if we're gonna be like completely honest here, maybe Fall of the 11th, Fall of the 11th is technically true. We could go off of this, that he's agreeing that he thinks that he's lying, but not for the definition that the 11th was arguing, which he was saying that the argument was, it was the first definition, to make an untrue statement with intent to deceive. That's the part we disagree on. I think it's the second definition myself.
I have no evidence it's the first. This video came out right as we were building momentum. Then, except for one boost in Germany, the signatures started drying up like clockwork. This put me in kind of a no-win scenario too, because if I ignored it, then a lot of people were going to get misinformed about the campaign. But if I did a response video, which is not something I wanted to do anyway, then it might look like drama farming, which could understandably turn off a lot of people from the campaign, because it's not about that at all. So I quickly made this video trying to clear up all misconceptions and concerns about the initiative with timestamps for everyone's questions, hoping the truth would eventually come out. I can see now that was a mistake.
Admittedly, I never saw this video. I didn't even know that this had come out. It got like pretty much, I'm assuming, not a whole lot of traffic.
I should have just embraced the drama. To this day, I'm still getting frequent comments and emails about the same falsehoods about the campaign that originated in this video. Well, now I have nothing to lose. If we don't get the signatures, then none of this matters anyway. So if this campaign is failing because of me not talking about this, then I'll at least correct history here on the way down. I'll get this over with and go over what I think are the biggest points of PirateSoftware's videos. I'm not going to go over everything because collectively Thor has made hours of video on both me and the movement. I'd be here forever. Believe me, I could address smaller things too, and kind of already have. Alright, let's start. Okay, point number 1. Thor does not understand what...
Okay, let's start.
Okay.
I'm going to do this at 1.25. He just talks a bit slower paced, but should be good.
Point number 1. Thor does not understand what Stop Killing Games is. Here it is in his words.
So for those who don't understand, the Stop Killing Games initiatives...
I was wrong.
...is
sorry.
basically, we don't want...
Oh, hold on. Okay, cool. Well, actually, we're going to take a pause here. I'm going to show you guys the email that Ross sent to me. So let's go back to that then. Since I showed pirate side of things, I want to show this side as well. The channel Harmful Opinions went into a bit proving the first definition of lie. If you could link that, if you're on the Discord, link that in the news links channel. One sec here. Let me get you an invite here. Let me see if that'll work. There we go. Here's a link to that. I'd like to see that. I've seen their stuff in the past. Okay. Let's see here. So, of course, I tailored these to 2 different people. So it's going to look a bit different from the one that I said to Thor. But so here's what I had to say. Hello, my name is Connor, or on YouTube I'm Quinty. I've got about 40k subs or 46k subs, and admittedly I cover content creator drama, but I want to chat with you about your initiative. I was currently doing research to prep for this video in regard to Stop Killing Games and PirateSoftware's impact on it. I honestly was pretty heated about the misrepresentation of your initiative, and as I was angrily working on the video, I took a second to breathe. I think a majority of this friction has been caused by Thor's complete resignation in regard to having any sort of conversation with you, and it's become 2 sides fighting each other. I realize a lot of people have come to your support like Moist Critical, but I wanted to see if you'd be interested in having a possible mediated discussion with PirateSoftware. I know the chance for this is low given what he's already said about the subject, but I genuinely think that given the opportunity to speak directly with you and work through your initiative and the criticisms you have with it, I think no matter what the end result is going to be, much more positive and productive in the endeavor of protecting consumer rights. I also know it's hard to agree to something with someone you know. Absolutely nothing about. So if you're interested, I'd love to have a chat and talk more about this. I figured reaching out to you and seeing if you would be down to try this would give me better odds when approaching Thor. I ended up going way too quick, and I ended up just having a chat anyway. My Discord username is Quintia, blah, blah. Thank you for taking time to read this, but more importantly, thank you for putting so much work into this initiative. My dream is to have a second channel devoted to gaming. It's my biggest passion. I just wanted to be like, hey, I know I'm a drama channel, but like, this. I saw that video. It seemed more emotionally charged to me based on the title, or at least the latest video from the channel. I don't know if there were more. Okay. So we have that. And then he replied to this. So let's go over that. I wish I could make that go away. That's annoying. Interesting. Whatever. I'll cut it out and that. Okay. Oh. Okay, cool. So this is what he said. Hey, while I can't say it's something I would be looking forward to, I'll of course agree to a mediated discussion with Pirate if he's interested in doing so. I would be very surprised if he was, however. You might have a career options You might have career options as an ambassador if you can pull that off. Unfortunately, ambassador is not looking good. Regarding a chat and the drama, my answer is maybe. It kind of depends on where you want to take things. I really didn't enjoy making the drama response video, but I felt like it was necessary since Pirate's influence had been misdirecting a lot of people and it never seemed to go away. I had 2 goals in making it. 1, try to motivate more people to sign this initiative. 2, clarify the situation to sort of clear my name on this. I don't expect anyone to agree with me. I don't expect everyone to agree with me, but there were way too many people still confused about what the initiative actually was. I wanted more people informed whether they agreed with it or not. I think both of those goals were achieved beyond my expectations, so it's mission accomplished in my eyes. I'm really not looking to kick Pirate while he's down on this, since I'm not looking to wreck his life. I just wanted the campaign to stop suffocating under him. That said, the last time I eased off, he went on to make 2 more videos on me, so I'm more on guard this time. I'm really not a revenge guy, I'm a solve the problem kind of guy. I think it was unavoidable that I had to show how badly he portrayed the campaign in order to solve those problems, which probably did harm his reputation some, but that wasn't the goal in itself. That was more like collateral damage. In any event, it's probably fine if you want some statements from me, but I doubt I'll have juicy lines for a drama channel. I'm just trying to boost signatures, so laying it on too hard on my part, I think, would be counterproductive to that. Now, I'm assuming this guy probably doesn't watch a ton of drama, or maybe he's watching the wrong kind. When I'm covering drama because I'm covering what's happening. I'm not trying to do, I'm not trying to get crazy sensational stuff for clicks. Like if it shows up, great, I'll cover it. But I just want, I just think that conversation would have been such a big help to the initiative. And I think it would have been a big help to Pirate to actually have that conversation. Like I truly wasn't going into this and offering and being like, hey, I'm frustrated with Pirate, and going over to him like, hey, I think you make good points. I'm detailing those because I both want them to actually have the conversation. I think that would have been useful. And at the end of the day, even if I wasn't a part of that conversation, I still would have covered it because I think that's really interesting. And I think that would have done a great deal in reducing the toxicity on Pirate's channel if he was willing to have an open, honest conversation and disagreement, more than likely, with Ross, but actually have the conversation. And so that's what was important for me. And so I just asked him if he was comfortable with me sharing it, and he said yeah. But I wasn't trying to pivot in some way. I'm not trying to kick Pirate while he's down, but if you are verifiably saying something that is wrong multiple times, and it's about an initiative that admittedly I definitely care about, like I'm a huge gamer, then yeah, I want to address those, and it makes me want to make a video like this. Like you guys know, I don't stream all the time with drama related content, but this one, I want to cover every piece of it. So this is one of the longest streams I think I've had too. But moving on. Let's get back to his video. So what were we just at? There we go. So let's continue on here, kind of cutting through.
Is in his words not understand. Start.
Okay. So his first point is showing that Thor does not understand the goal of the Stop Killing Games initiative.
Okay, point number 1. Thor does not understand what Stop Killing Games is. Here it is in his words.
So for those who don't understand, the Stop Killing Games initiatives is basically, we don't want single-player games to have DRM that the developers can turn off and thus render the single-player games inactive anymore. This is what they want to change. They need to be specific that they're talking about single-player games that do not need a server to support them.
No.
And as much as they want it to be about specifically games where it is a single-player game that has always online functionality, it would impact every live service game that exists, instead of just targeting single-player, always online games.
No. That's not what it is. Stop Killing Games includes single-player games, but nothing about it is specific to them. He completely made that up, and I have no idea where he got that impression. This is what I mean. It's harder for gamers to understand this because they come with so many assumptions. It's like that saying about doctors being the worst patients. So let's clear this up. It's the first line on the website. Stop Killing Games is a consumer movement started to challenge the legality of publishers destroying video games they have sold to customers.
Thank you. Sorry. So, so he's made it clear, right? He's showing, okay, so Stop Killing Games consumer movement started to challenge the legality of publishers. So this is the point, but also this is also the one that Pirate is working off of. He is focused on leaving the video games in a functional, playable state, right? So those are the two. I want to also make it clear that, we're still seeing both of those arguments. So like he's addressing that what we're seeing, and this is the one that Pirate is looking at. So maybe there's a disagreement in that, because this is what he's focused on, and this is what Ross is focused on, right? Just want to include that too, because I'm not trying to like hide the fact that they're looking at two different things. I don't want that to come off as like, misrepresenting that.
But the movement includes all this stuff from earlier, and he was mostly talking about...
He was talking about this, so these are the things that they did over the last year. This is the actions that they had taken over the span of the last 10 months here. There's 2 months left for the initiative to hit 1 million, so he's trying to push for that, which is why he came forward with this video, because he thinks that it's kind of like ending.
The initiative. Well, the short version is the initiative is about requiring publishers to have end-of-life plans for games they've sold to customers in the future. So when they shut them down, customers can continue running them without their support. The long version depends on what kind of transaction is being made. As you can see, it's not easy to explain in a soundbite. But if you notice, we don't make a distinction between single-player and multiplayer games. That's because the law doesn't either. So why make this even harder? Both the movement and the law are making distinctions on how games are sold.
So so there's no point in what he's saying. There's no point in narrowing down and talking about specifically single player games or specifically live service games, because we're just talking about game purchases. The entire game industry, whenever you are purchasing a video game, these are laws that should be in place for that. Now, on the other hand, PirateSoftware is arguing that that doesn't work, that blanketing all of that under one thing does not make sense and doesn't work.
Also, that part he said about it affecting all live service games, yes and no. It would affect most live service games in the future, but the initiative is not retroactive. So that's one thing Thor doesn't understand, but he also seems to think this is about converting multiplayer games to single player.
Sorry, I just want to focus on that retroactive. So this isn't retroactive. This is very similar to other policies that will get put in place in the future. They go into effect later down the line. You've seen that before with other games, or good example is when a game shut down. They give you a heads up. They give you a couple months of leeway in the same way so that you can kind of prepare for that. So in the same way that this initiative would get started, that doesn't mean that when it gets set in, they're not gonna make this retroactively. They're not gonna force that out for games that were put out 10 years ago. That doesn't make sense. So it'd be things coming out in the future, which gives the industry enough time to prep for that, right?
Understand, but he also seems to think this is about converting multiplayer games to single player. Once again, he made that up, and I have no idea why he thought that.
Transitioning an entire multiplayer server-side game into a single-player video game, which means rebalancing the entire experience around single player, rebuilding everything in the entire game. How are you going to do that with Final Fantasy XIV? You're just going to make all the raids soloable? Imagine the day that World of Warcraft shuts down, and suddenly you have to make it a single-player game for every individual that ever bought the game. That's what they're asking for.
No.
Because they would have to sunset live service games as a single-player experience. The idea that suddenly you need to make every single live service game playable single-player offline? No, dude.
Correct.
So so we're clear, he showed 3 examples there, at least. He showed 3 examples of Thor making the same claim, that the goal is, in regard to that, a functional playable game is to make multiplayer games into single-player games.
Correct.
This game playable single-player offline? No, dude.
Correct. No. This one is particularly baffling to me because I've heard most counter-arguments before, but until Thor, I've never heard this one. That we want the industry to convert all multiplayer games into single-player ones. I keep saying it, you never know where gamers are going to take this.
Nowhere in there does it say that it's directly targeting always online single-player games.
Oh, he's so close. He's so close to getting it.
It is vague, and because of that, it will impact.
He never has that light bulb moment. Well, he is correct in that statement. It's almost as if that's not what the initiative is asking for. But those were his streams with a smaller audience. What does he say in his big YouTube video with over 1 million views that he had time to research?
If we're trying to kill off the practice of developers putting together a live service game, pitching it as a single-player experience, and then taking away support in the future.
Now he's changed it again and is making up how it's about single-player games are advertised. What is he doing?
It needs to be specific about the business practice it's trying to defeat, which is specifically companies that are doing this under the guise of it being a single-player game, but adding online-only functionality that is not necessary and doesn't add any gameplay elements. That's the problem.
No, that's not it at all.
And there are some people that'll say, well, just make it all single player.
Like
well,
you?
I've explained that doesn't make any sense in the first place. If you're making it all single player, you'd have to carve off all of that, and it's developer time and money. These are two different ideologies, and that's okay to have two different ideologies. I just won't agree with it.
But those aren't the ideologies. Nothing in the initiative is asking to convert games to single player.
Nowhere in there does it say that it's directly targeting always online single
player.
Nowhere in there does it say that it's directly targeting always online single-player games.
Yeah, so why does he keep bringing it up? This is a total red herring.
If we don't like the idea of live service games as a whole, I get it. Don't play live service games then. Don't agree to those terms.
No, he's getting a new thing wrong now. We're not...
So I just wanted to show. So a lot of the arguments that I was making, a lot of the things I was pointing out had come from like learning about this video, but also just like I looked at the initiative and then watched his, and then I watched this video. I watched the second half of this after I'd reached out to PirateSoftware. I had just watched this beginning stuff, which didn't even like really talk about Pirate. So there were some arguments he made that I agreed with more so until I saw the rebuttals that Ross included in this video. This right here is why everyone calls him a liar, because the argument changed 3 times. Again, like I agree with his lying where it's not he's doing it intentionally to deceive people. I think he was lying because he was misrepresenting the truth of it. And he like hyper fixated on his understanding of the initiative, how wrong that is, and then he just kept pushing on it. And now his ego is not going to allow him to walk back from that. So maybe more recently, maybe he is self-aware of it. Like there's definitely, I'd be willing to have like a discussion argument there, but talking about like where this has started and what he's talking about right now in this video, and like what he's showing in the videos that Pirate had made, I don't know if that's enough proof to show that he's like maliciously lying. He is lying technically, that he is being that he's wrong, that he's saying that something that is verifiably false. But you know what I mean.
Against them existing, we're against... Oh, he's getting a new thing wrong now. We're not against them existing, we're against them being destroyed with no recourse for the customer. Just use logic. If we didn't like them in the first place, why would we care if they're being destroyed? He says he gets it, but he doesn't.
Let's talk about the actual...
So maybe I'm being nitpicky here, but just for the sake of like counter argument, why would we care if they're being destroyed? Well, maybe he did argue it in this video because we did just watch it. Maybe you guys can correct me, but he was talking about, you know, an extreme would be, we don't like live service games, so we're in support of this Stop Killing Games initiative, so we're okay if they go away. Why would you care if they're being destroyed? Hold on, what was my argument?
Destroyed. He says he gets it, but he doesn't.
Let's
use logic. If we didn't like them in the first place, why would we care if they're being destroyed?
So, what did I think? I don't know what I was thinking.
Like them wrong now. We're not against them existing, we're against them being destroyed with no recourse for the customer. Just use logic. if we didn't like them in the first...
I can't remember the argument I was making. Ignore me. But I think, again, this is a pretty good point. It doesn't make sense that, you know, they'd want them destroyed. I think the point that Pirate was trying to make, though, is that in the endeavor of preserving all games, that is inherently going to destroy this genre of video games. Maybe that's the point I was trying to make. Or that's his perception of how the Stop Killing Games initiative is going to impact that genre of games, that being live service.
Place, why would we care if they're being destroyed? He says he gets it, but he doesn't.
Let's talk about the actual bad business practices. In the case that a studio is making a live service game and they sell it to you as a product, they say that you are purchasing the game or you are buying the game, when in reality you're actually purchasing or buying a license to that game. I think that we should be fighting about that. The initiative is not trying to call that out specifically. It's trying to say that all games need to stay in a functionable, playable state.
Yes!
Which is not calling out the language that is being used to manipulate the player. Call that out specifically.
Okay, I don't know if he's doing this intentionally. I'll be charitable and assume he's not. But this is some serious obfuscation. He's complaining that the initiative isn't focused on another topic he made up. I mean, what is that logic? Hey, the initiative doesn't address how Capcom changed the look of Dante in the Devil May Cry reboot either. That may as well be what he's saying there. I am not aware of a game on the planet with a license agreement that says you are not buying a license. Our problem is not with licenses failing to inform people. Blizzard says they can take away your purchase for no reason. That sounds pretty clear to me. Our problem is those terms are so hostile to consumers and the medium that they should be taken off the table entirely. This needs regulation. Forgive.
I really agree with that. Even like I'm kind of both sides. Like I actually think that Pirate's point is good. I'm in agreement with Ross that it is no weight in the arguments that are being made about the initiative. It's just bringing up something that he thought is important and then acting like that's what the focus should be because he believes that it's more important. Whereas I think that Ross makes a really good example as to why he's not focusing on that. He's more focused on the fact that these games like Blizzard, they could just remove your opportunity to own that game and possess it at any moment for any reason. Although you agree to that, that's still incredibly hostile for customers. And when you have such a big IP, well, it's not like you really get a say in that. Like you're still going to get it. And if you have that restriction where it just gets taken away from you at any time, that shouldn't be our standard practice. And I agree with him on that. Not saying that that is technically true or like that I would know somehow, but I think as most consumers would agree with that sentiment.
Video games, if you look at basic commerce for hundreds of years, when you paid money, you either got to keep what you paid for, or if it was a service, you were told when your access ends. The vast majority of online-only games do neither of those. The games industry is trying to upend basic commerce. I think you have to go back to feudalism before neither of those things are true. Why even have consumer laws if you have no rights?
If you try to tell me that every studio needs to run their live service game indefinitely or not want to run one at all, then no one's going to run them.
Oh no! He wheeled out that line about publishers having to support the game forever. He was literally watching the video earlier where it says it won't do that in big letters. That wasn't enough. We just can't stop gamers from going there, even when we spell it out. I admit, guys, this part hurts. To see the biggest voice on this issue get it wrong again and again and again, then put that same wrong information on blast to a far bigger audience than we can reach. It hurts. He doesn't get it. He doesn't understand what we're asking for. Now, to be fair, it sounded like he was getting a little closer in this video. Yeah, despite being called two, it's at least the fourth video he did on this.
So now he's going to start, I think, addressing the second part of the video.
You want that to stay in a functional, playable state. That means the devs have to release either server binaries or somehow carve off the game to be a single-player experience now.
That's better, but he's still talking about converting the single-player right to the end. He never completely got it. So PirateSoftware did not understand the initiative. Maybe still doesn't. That means the majority of his critique is about things it would not do, like kill all MMOs.
If that passes, enjoy never playing an MMO again for the rest of your life and taking away from every other person that plays MMOs.
It really wouldn't. And I've explained why in that video, but the short version is companies would have to stop liking money for that to happen. Lots of money. But his #1 criticism is that he thinks the initiative is vague.
Incredibly vague. Too vague. Very vague. Damn vague. It's vague. It's vague. That is vague. Too vague. Vaguely written.
Sorry, okay, we're going to get into the vague thing. But there's lots of money argument. With so many people loving MMOs, why would people not do that? Why would they not work on workarounds? Why would they not work on making sure that it is a staple to make sure that the game is functionable, or at least they give access to creating servers for people on the other side of it? Maybe you gotta deal with how we figure out, people abusing that and making pay-to-win servers, like what you see with like Minecraft or Gary's mod, for example. Although I don't know if there are stipulations in place for that specifically, but you get the point, right? Like MMOs, like there's too much money in it for them to just completely disappear. And so that like slippery slope fallacy or like arguments like, well, okay, well, they're just never going to exist. Like it's not based in anything concrete. He's just making that assumption and just saying that is the truth. Like you're never going to see him.
But his #1 criticism is that he thinks the initiative is vague.
Incredibly vague. Too vague. Very vague. Damn vague. It's vague. It's vague. That is vague. Too vague. Vaguely written. Vague. Incredibly vague. Vaguely worded. Vague. 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 This is vague.
This goes on. Well, from Thor's perspective, his logic is pretty sound for this part. But the thing about logic is it's only as good as your assumed truths. And he's said multiple times now that he thinks the initiative is only about single-player games. So since he's expecting the thing he made up, but that's not what the initiative is asking for, he thinks it's vague. Because for him, it is.
Nowhere in there does it say that it's directly targeting always online single-player games. It is vague.
Yeah, in fact, if we look at that long definition again, let's add a subsection just for Thor. Single-player games with an online DRM check. Those would already fall under this broader category. So
this broader category that he's talking about, that he's saying throwing that under, is games sold as one-time purchase with no stated expiration date that require a connection to the publisher or affiliated parties to function. Publishers would be required to implement an end-of-life plan so that their support would no longer be necessary to run the game once it is shut down. So commercial single-player games that run locally but require a connection to the publisher for DRM authentication check. That does the exact same thing. It's pretty much the exact same thing that he described. Or that we just described there.
Thor is expecting this. Again, I don't know why, but instead he's seeing an initiative that covers all of this. That's why.
So again, even then, Pirate is narrowing down his view to one specific part that he thinks that the initiative is about when it's not that.
He calls it vague 50 times. The thought that we want what we're asking for and not the thing he made up seems to have never entered his head. The initiative is trying to stop the destruction of games. That's the whole point. It covers the types of games most in need of saving. If we only covered this tiny subsection, that would save maybe 1% or less of games that get destroyed. This would do almost nothing. I'm not saying there isn't one, but I literally can't think of a game that meets this criteria. Every game I know of with single-player content that's been destroyed has been designed to run server-side, not locally. Older ones like that tend to have the DRM cracked, which is not an ideal solution, but that does stop game destruction. And newer ones with Denuvo or something tend to have it removed by end of life. So I say less than 1%, but this might save 0% of games. I'm not sure. The initiative is actually not that vague. Though to be fair, some people did get hung up on this part. A reasonably playable or functional state.
Perfect. Okay, so now we are moving into, I would argue, one of the most important parts of discussing this, since that is the main objective that Pirate had such an issue with in regard to this being a good initiative, or being what he believes is a terrible one, a very grossly misbegotten or, poorly put together initiative.
True, that is not 100% specific. There are reasons for that. You know how in law, police can stop a suspect with reasonable suspicion? Or a jury finds someone guilty beyond all reasonable doubt? That's because the number of situations you face are so varied that the law has to inject some common sense somewhere. It's the same with games. A multi-million-dollar MMO is a different animal from a budget arena shooter. It won't work making highly specific laws. That's one half of it. The other half of it is this sentence is an olive branch to publishers. I've heard complaints this isn't specific enough. Okay, but you know what the alternative to this would be? Here, I'll show you. The game must be fully functional and contain 100% of all features as advertised. So as a publisher, which requirement would you rather meet? More importantly, this sentence shows the EU Commission that we're acting in good faith and trying to find a balance. I think some of the people asking for this to be more specific may not realize what they're asking for. I know some won't believe this, but a hell of a lot of thought went into the wording of the initiative. I think it's almost perfect.
I think that is a really, really good point. And it had come to me briefly when I was doing research for this. I came to that conclusion before I'd even seen this, because I'd seen it get brought up again. I was like, well, maybe it's supposed to be vague because this is an initiative. This is the startup. This is, as we're going to get into having a conversation. If it gets enough signatures, then it's going to get taken seriously. And we're for sure going to have that conversation. So it only makes sense to leave that vague so that there's room to have a discussion, so that it's reasonable and we can figure out how far into being reasonable it is, or how reasonable it is to figure out ways to work around that, or set the gaming industry set up the gaming industry for success if this were to get instated, if any parts of this initiative were to actually get instated into EU law. So I was really happy to see him cover it, because he eloquently put it in a much more understandable way than even I was processing it at the time.
See, the initiative isn't even a proposed bill. It's a negotiation. Our side says we want games to be functional when publishers end support, so they need end-of-life plans. The industry's position is going to be against whatever we write and claim they need no regulation whatsoever. Then the EU Commission gets to decide who is more in the right here. The Citizens Initiative is the opening offer in these negotiations. Trust me, the industry worth hundreds of billions of dollars will make its position known to the EU. We don't have to make their case for them. So for this negotiation, simple is good. That's why we're straight and to the point for what we want. Then the industry will argue against that. Then the EU Commission might look for compromises. You don't start a negotiation with a bunch of compromises, because then it will get so watered down you won't save anything. Oh, and that long definition list are actually logical extensions of the simpler language used in the initiative. It's actually kind of slick. Plus, there's a character limit on these things. The EU Commission doesn't want you trying to cover 50 edge cases at this phase. Alright, so PirateSoftware did not understand the initiative.
This last part, I think that this is also just trying to be generous to Thor, where they don't want you to cover 50 edge cases. So like the edge case that PirateSoftware presented about people going in and completely ripping apart someone's game with the sole intent of creating private servers, given that, let's say, this initiative goes through, they're forced to give those servers, they're forced to give that information, and then they end up creating a monetized server where they're making money off of someone else's art. That is one of these edge cases that I think would be hashed out once you start to get to have the discussion. That would be really important to bring up, because it's a valid edge case, right? Like that could happen in, the situation, the hypothetical. It'd be rare, but that's why it's called an edge case. And of course, Cam Nuggets has entered my chat as soon as he heard edge and edging case. Welcome back.
Yes. All right, so PirateSoftware did not understand the initiative. But point two, he also did not make it easy for the truth to get out. I had never heard of him prior to all this, but during the campaign, I had dozens of people contacting me, telling me how wise and reasonable he is, how he's really pro-consumer and represents developers, and I should really talk to him. Great, let's do it. So this was my first encounter of him.
Oh shit, now this is actually really dumb. It's used car salesman garbage. This is shit. It's shit. Not only do I not want to back this, I'm going to actively tell people not to. That is awful. That is a horrible goddamn direction. That's awful, dude. No, eat my entire ass. that the level of stupid that I just had to receive was like sitting on Twitter for 12 hours. This shit sucks. That's a really stupid-ass move. That's an incredibly stupid-ass move. I think this is ass. This is complete garbage. All of this can eat shit then. I drop the mask entirely. I have no qualms about that. They can eat my entire ass. The whole thing. That sounds stupid as shit.
Oh, yeah. I can see why people like him. It's like listening to Mr. Rogers. As you can imagine, we've been less than thrilled that Thor...
So, sorry.
I have no
So
qualms.
this entire collage of him just being like, oh, this is the worst thing I've ever seen. Eat my entire ass multiple times. Like, all of this, I think it's just really helping paint the picture of how hypocritical Pirate has been to covering this situation. Because he's gone on to talk about, like, how much harassment that he's received through this. Specifically with that most recent post, I just want to bring it back up just to show you guys that. So we just heard him do all of that, like truly, like just ripping him apart. And then we come and take a look over to this. Been reading through all the posts against me over my stance on the Stop Killing Games. Tons of people calling me a liar that I misrepresented the initiative. Also lots of creators dogpiling on this to get their pound of flesh. Wait, that's not what I wanted to show you guys. Oh, many people have not watched them or are just calling me a liar or attacking my character. Give the videos a watch, make a conclusion. So you weren't even willing to have the conversation with him to, you know, figure that out. I was willing to extend a branch, but even then, and you were calling this man doo-doo batter, and you were calling the movement doo-doo batter. You were calling him a used car salesman, or you were calling it used car salesman garbage. So, I know I use the phrase too. It's just funny seeing him use it that much. That eat my entire ass. Yeah, it's just weird. It's just I don't know. His actions, like, oh, there's so many toxic people. There's so many bad people that are going around being super toxic about this. And like the way that you introduced this to your audience when it first came out, before there was any drama or anything, was this can eat my entire ass. This is the worst thing ever. This is bad. This is shit. That's not fair. Pirate said that he wouldn't talk to Ross because in the video, Ross talks about being an easy win. Politicians won't need to think about it, etc. We're actually going to get to that. He actually addresses that in this video. And I'm not specifically talking about his inability to chat with PirateSoftware. I'm talking about the hypocrisy of him crying about the toxicity that he has endured in the process of kind of combating the people that disagree with him on his stance and his misrepresentation of the initiative. I'm focused on that because the way that he introduced this was quite candidly very, very similar in essence to what he's complaining about now. But back to the video.
Qualms about that. They can eat my entire ass. The whole thing. That sounds stupid as shit.
The cut is unfair, not you. I think he was just talking about his introduction to PirateSoftware and his experience on it. But he will go in later. It looks, I would admit, it looks like a worse cut because I'm pausing it. But yeah.
Oh yeah, I can see why people like him. It's like listening to Mr. Rogers. As you can imagine, we've been less than thrilled that Thor here has become the dominant voice of the campaign, especially when he doesn't understand it. Though I did find the used car salesman part amusing, since if people could read my mind, they would understand how much I dread anything resembling sales or marketing, or just trying to push things on people who aren't interested in them. I'm not exaggerating when I said I've hated having to run this campaign.
This is the most uneducated take I have ever seen in games.
Now, as for that one, I do have a bachelor's in criminal justice, which might explain why I'm coming at this from very different angles than he is. You know, focusing on people having rights and checking what consumer law actually says, rather than what's most convenient for publishers. Though I think I know.
I think that's also a really good point. That's like a perfect understanding if we're falling back to, is he being malicious? Like is he being maliciously deceitful? The reason I'm led to believe no, that he's just lying and just misrepresenting, not doing it intentionally, is because he's looking at this from the perception of a publisher and the impacts that could have on publishers and developers of games, as opposed to this guy looking at it from that legal consumer practices like perspective. It gives him a very different opinion on it. I don't think you can say he gave it a fair opinion when he dismisses something by telling the creator of the initiative to eat your ass instead of having a conversation. I think he gave it a fair opinion insofar as his lens goes. Did I say he was giving it a fair shake? If I did, I didn't mean it. He gave it his opinion, and I would say he just wasn't acting maliciously. He was just emotionally responding to it, and also coming from the perspective of a game developer, which, you're being forced to put more work in. You could imagine that the tunnels or the rabbit holes you would jump down about that being like way too expensive, things like that. Like, you can, in my head, I can see that from the perspective of a game developer off the rip. If you're not thinking deeply about it, or you're not willing to have a conversation with the leader of the initiative, that's like, I think we could see why that could maybe, you jump the gun a bit. But I think it takes your ego to kind of go push past that and then, stand on that high ground. I'm pretty sure Pirate just talked shit because he felt safe due to his audience, but the moment people with more influence than him joins in, he starts getting defensive. I think people disagreeing with him, he gets defensive. I'd say that was telling. I'd say that was more telling than his obfuscating lol. That fair.
I know where that comment is coming from because I've got most convenient for publishers. Though I think I know where that comment is coming from because I've gotten it before. Here's what I think is happening. Online-only games have a client and a server, but a lot also have middleware that developers don't have permission to distribute to customers, or depend on microservices they have no control over, and the
Okay, so I think he's going to reference this, so maybe I'll get pause champed, but he's specifically talking about here in this example, think about like the crew. Remember, the issue with the crew and why it wouldn't work is because these microservices, or like these licenses they bought for the car brands, or the cars that they were using, those were attached and they didn't own that. They had to like purchase a certain amount of time for those licenses. So sorry, I'll let him talk, but that's keep in mind that we're thinking about like the crew
and a server. But a lot also have middleware that developers don't have permission to distribute to customers, or depend on microservices they have no control over, and the server software isn't even designed to run on a customer system. You can't just cut out the middleware and remove the microservices because they're integrated too deeply. That would still leave the game bricked and could take months to fix and be a lot of work. So I think some devs think we're saying all they need to do is just release the server binaries at end of life, and yay, everything is solved. And that's why they think we're ignorant. Well, for some games that could work, but not ones like these. Plus, that's not what we're saying. First off, we're not even mandating the methodology because, again, doing that could run afoul of copyright law. Second, this whole diagram is looking at a game that exists right now and was never designed to have an end-of-life plan. Those might not be salvageable. So what we're saying is, let's take a game in the future. No code has been written yet. It's still just a design document. Okay, so we have the client portion as usual. Then we have the server logic. Now we'll bring in our usual middleware and microservice vendors. Nope, stop. Now the EU says we can't just brick customer purchases like we've been doing if we want to sell our games there. So that means we can't keep making all these same deals the way we have been. Now we need to renegotiate with the vendors to allow for an end-of-life build with their software, or redesign things to make the microservices easier to sever at end of life. And vendors probably will renegotiate. Otherwise, they'll start losing sales to everyone who wants to sell games in the EU. But say a vendor refuses anyway. Then we need to go with vendor B, who will offer EU-compliant solutions because they will be happy to take money away from their competitor, vendor A. Or maybe we need to abandon one of the microservices altogether and come up with an in-house alternative that is compatible with an end-of-life plan.
And now you can see also that what he's talking about, what he's focusing on, as specifically with this, is how the market would like kind of recenter itself. This is just kind of like, I'm not getting into like free market is perfect, but a market will correct itself when like vacuums are created. If a service is not willing to be EU compliant with the initiative, things like that, then there's going to be one that comes along that is willing to work with you and do that extra backend, because that means they're going to get paid and one of their competitors is not. Huge dub, big dub.
And if the server can't run on consumer hardware, Well, maybe now we code it in a way that's more versatile and can be compiled to run a stripped-down version with less features for the customer machine at end of life. Or hey, if that's not doable, then we scrap that, but still give customers some form of server software at end of life, because now we've planned for this, and inform them it requires specialized hardware, and they're on their own for getting it working. And these are all just suggestions. The publisher would get to decide how they want to comply. Thor is not alone in developers trashing what I just said. I don't know why, but some of the nastiest insults I've received on the entire campaign have been when I try to explain this is what we're asking for. This part in particular triggers some people to no end.
That video made me actually mad. Like real mad. Not like fake memes mad, like actually mad. Like I'm actually mad.
Upsetting people is not our goal, by the way.
Oh.
We actually want this transition to be as easy as possible for publishers and developers. However, we are stubbornly against proposals that won't stop commercial games being destroyed, because that's the whole point. Anyway, you heard Thor's comments for me. In light of that, I think I've been pretty diplomatic. I am just trying to get this initiative passed. If that means I have to get insulted all along the way, okay. So with that in mind, I reached out to him, not expecting to change his mind, but to at least clarify things since he got so much wrong.
Okay, so now he's going into talking about actually responding to Thor and his videos, and I think it's a comment that he put on his video.
If you're gonna hate us, at least hate us for what we're actually doing, not for things that are made up about us.
I got a message from Ross. There were many other misunderstandings in your video. It's clear that you hate the initiative, and I doubt I would change that. That is correct. I would encourage you to at least hate it for what it actually is. I do.
He says that so confidently. Oh yeah, you knocked it out of the park. You understood everything.
In other words, the customer is told explicitly that their access ends at the time.
Oh, sorry, this right here.
So confidently.
Would encourage you to at least hate it for what it actually is. I do.
He said,
I do. Apparently, he does accurately understand it, even though he's being told he doesn't buy the leader of that initiative. Now, admittedly, actually, that's a logical fallacy. Just because you're being told it by the leader, that's just whatever that's called. Just listening simply because it's from someone of a place of power. That's incorrect. But like it's so many people. It's not just him. That's again another logical fallacy. It is misrepresenting the focal point of the initiative. That is true. We've kind of gone over that and showcased it.
Says that so confidently. Oh yeah, you knocked it out of the park. You understood everything.
In other words, the customer is told explicitly that their access ends at the time of payment. Most live service games do not do this, which could run afoul of EU law. Most is patently incorrect.
Patently incorrect? Okay, for those who don't know much about live service games, that's like saying the Earth isn't round. He says verifiably false things so confidently. If his viewers don't know any better, how can I blame anyone for believing what he says about the initiative when he talks like that? It's incredible. And he does not wish to discuss this with me or anyone else in the initiative. Why not?
Would you consider reaching out and talking to Ross about it? No. And the reason why is because I found his entire statement over the YouTube incredibly disingenuous.
Yes, this issue which has bothered me since I was a teenager and I've spent 10 years on trying to push back against is me being disingenuous. Where is this coming from? Well, it comes from a slide I had in my promotional video, the half-joke slide. He hated this, and I think he may have a...
Okay, so now we're actually getting into that slide that he talked about where he didn't like the politics of it then, and so he's addressing it in regard to why he won't speak to him. So now we're really getting into the nitty-gritty. So let's hear what he has to say in response to that. And he's calling it a joke slide to start with. He's calling it a joke slide to start with.
The half-joke slide. He hated this, and I think he may have a rather privileged view of politics.
You want to put together legislation because it's the right thing to do.
We did!
Not because you can convince legal representatives to do it no matter what.
It's both! These are not mutually exclusive things!
The idea that we're going to go through this because it's an easy win, but not the right win? No, dude.
Oh, God. So he misunderstood the initiative and misunderstood our intentions. And in his words, this is why he refuses to have a dialogue with the movement.
So, he has an issue, and he's creating a false dichotomy. That you have to do this for, hold on.
Not mutually exclusive things.
The idea, no matter what, convince legal representative to do.
We did.
Not because you
View of politics.
Sorry.
You want to put together legislation because it's the right thing to do.
We did.
Not because you can convince legal representatives to do it.
So you want to create something that's good. You want to create something that is good and also could actually get voted in. Why does it have to be one or the other? That sounds like two things that go perfectly hand in hand. Like, just because you're also including why it would be easy or why it would be less difficult for it to get passed in legally doesn't mean that that's necessarily bad to bring that up. It could also just be, you know, you want to get people invested in signing for it. How many petitions have you signed where it has meant absolutely nothing? You know, so getting people to be interested in that and focusing on that, that's not a bad thing.
No matter what.
It's
Through this
intentions. And in his words, this is why he refuses to have a dialogue with the movement. So now I have to address it. Let's keep it basic. He calls me disingenuous, implying I don't believe what I'm pushing for, that this is some sort of con. That's uncharitable to the point of being silly. Besides video evidence going back 10 years, this is not a hard concept to grasp. I hate seeing creative works needlessly destroyed when people are trying to save them, and video games are where I see that happen the most. Of course I believe in what I'm advocating for. Maybe start from there. I'm a little surprised that didn't sink in.
the idea of getting it to pass with an easy win instead of pass because it's good is a problem to me. Absolute problem.
That's not how politics works. Do you think things pass because they're good ideas? Tell that to people who still have lead in their water. A lot of gamers are jaded with
That's a pretty
good
point.
cause.
That's a pretty good point. Yeah, you can have a good cause, but that's not going to matter much if you can't get it through Parliament. If you can't get it through the legal system. Even the new WoW stuff, I feel like he was IQ baiting, wanting to be seen as the smartest in the room at all times. Yeah, always.
The industry has been shaking them down every which way. The perception that it's hopeless to protect our rights against billion-dollar conglomerates is often correct. If I told people this would pass just because it's a good idea, I wouldn't believe me. This slide is a half joke, but it's also some totally cynical reasons that are often true to let people know we have a chance and this isn't utterly hopeless.
Again, I really think it's a good point to make. And also, like, the used car salesman guy, the used car salesman guy would be like, yeah, I got to feed a family. You're helping the economy. Instead of telling you, well, there's legitimate reasons that you should buy this,
Good? What we care about is that they pass something good. Utterly hopeless. Do you think I or most people in the movement give a damn why politicians might pass something good? What we care about is that they pass something good. We don't need them to be true believers. We need them to pass good law. This is as soft as it possibly gets in politics. I think most politicians would find this slide funny. It sounds like he's offended I have a low opinion of the political process. Well, I'm the one in the trenches here. I'm not sure if he's upset at me or just upset at reality. Yeah, I am too. Anyway, he went on to delete my reply to him. Thankfully, someone backed it up, and I figured, okay, he hates this. It was thrust upon him by his viewers. I'll just leave him be. Well, that was a mistake on my part, because then he went on to make more videos about me and the movement, now reaching over 1 million views, still broadcasting the wrong information on us. I guess I'm being petty here, but this is alien thinking to me. Why would you call someone out, then run away from a conversation with them when they say there's a misunderstanding? Also, I guess I'm being petty here.
Shelf, thank you very much. I'm actually going to change the thumbnail real quick. That's a good one. There we go. Sorry. Give me 2 seconds, guys. Okay. There we go. Sorry. Thank you guys for your patience. Here we go. Perfect. Okay. Booyah. All right, we're back.
Here, but this is alien thinking to me. Why would you call someone out, then run away from a conversation with them when they say there's a misunderstanding, but then go on to make more videos calling them out? Sir, that is not gentlemanly behavior. All right, I know this is going on too long, so I'll get to the final point.
Okay.
Thor misunderstood the initiative, misunderstood our intentions, and misinformed a lot of people about both. But the irony is, I think he would have hated it even more if he did understand it. Because first, he doesn't see any of this as a problem.
Gaming isn't in need of saving. No, it's not a form of planned obsolescence. It's called the game no longer being profitable and we turn it off. No games are being destroyed here. These are live service games.
Yeah, you heard him. No games are being destroyed. Does he just say anything? Is that why he's popular? More to the point, and what I wish he included in his main video, is he supports games being destroyed.
A very strange demand from people in the gaming industry where live service games should live forever, whether in the hands of the developer or otherwise. And I can't get behind that shit. I think live service games getting sunsetted is fine. I've always thought that. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that at all. I have no problems with the end of a video game.
See, I wish he started his big YouTube video with that message instead of deleting it.
That would have been massively useful. That would have been massively useful for people understanding. And what's interesting is like he's making those points, in which case, just like he said, he would have hated it even more because he is like, that is like the antithesis of the initiative, which is, it's interesting that he dislikes it for the reasons that he does, even if they're not like, even if he's talking about reasons that are not representative of the actual initiative. But at the same time, had he addressed it that properly, like this would have been included in his video. Like he would have included these arguments in that video.
Instead, he presented himself as pro-preservation and not wanting the medium to die out.
It's incredibly important to me that we keep making games and that the next generation has the tools to do so that our medium doesn't die out. And it never will. And that's the whole intention of all of this.
So he doesn't want...
So he's saying he doesn't want the industry of developing games to die out. I will say, I don't think he understood this point as well. I don't think he's like shoehorning it in, but
games
that we keep making games and that the next generation has the tools to do so that our medium doesn't die out. And it never will. And
so he doesn't want the gaming medium to die out. And his worry was that this would kill out live service games. So he's worried about that atrophying the game industry. He's not talking about, you know, just games in general being destroyed. As he's already clearly said, like, I don't think this is a separation of belief or like a dissonance between belief.
That's the whole intention of all of this.
Adios, Ninja. Goodbye, Ninja. Thanks for stopping in.
So he doesn't want games to die out, except he's fine with that. I think there's some cognitive dissonance going on there. And he's against killing single-player games that only have a DRM check, okay? But then says people who buy single-player games with more than a DRM check are stupid, and he doesn't play those.
I don't buy games that are always online single player games. I refuse to play those because it's stupid.
That's some tough talk coming from a fan of Diablo 4.
It's actually really freaking good, dude. The game's fantastic. Itemization is great. Systems design is great. Storyline has been fantastic. The characters are good. The voice acting is great.
So
I would definitely say that that is a very good. I would say that is a much better example of the cognitive dissonance as opposed to the other things that he's brought up. The other thing that he brought up before this one.
he's saying he wouldn't have played Diablo 4's single-player campaign if it didn't have forced multiplayer also, even though he's praising it and appears to be playing solo? Or is he saying that people that just wanted to play Diablo 4 single-player are stupid? I admit I got lost on his stance there, but what's more clear to me is we're not on the same side. Here's a list of some popular games that are all at risk of being destroyed at some time in the future. The Stop Killing Games movement sees any of these being destroyed as a problem, and they're exactly the kinds of games that would start being protected if the initiative passed. Now, a lot of these do have single-player campaigns, but I believe they all require more than a simple DRM check. He says over and over that his problem with the initiative is the wording, and it's vague. But there is no wording he would like that also saves games like these, because he's on the opposite side of this. If he's totally fine with games like these being disabled forever, well, guess what? That's the position of the industry causing this entire problem in the first place. And that's the final point. Thor says he disagrees with how we're going about trying to end game destruction, but he also disagrees with the goal itself. No, wait, I want to be fair. He's only against 99% of it minus that tiny provision he made up. So once you understand that, then of course it makes sense that he's against the Stop Killing Games movement. Because we're trying to stop killing games. Now, if you're in Thor's camp and think killing all these games is fine and are as things should be, okay. Then it's just a values clash. And yeah, you'll hate the initiative too. I'm not trying to tell you otherwise. But if you think you might have been misled about what the initiative is, hey, maybe look at it again. Tell others about it. Help undo some of the damage. There is still time in the community for having good takes on gaming. I did not enjoy having to do that segment.
Okay, so that's in essence his entire coverage of PirateSoftware's involvement on this. So we went over those videos. We went over and talked about Charlie's. I don't need to cover his video. He's upset. I think it's an ego thing. So we've gone through, we've gone ahead over this stream. Sorry, a lot of mouth noises. We've gone through and discussed all of his videos, and we also saw the response were the rebuttals to the points that he made in his videos. So now we've done that. Let's go back to his tweet, okay? Let's see. Monetization on these videos. So aren't copy pasting from social media. Okay. So, well, let's all together chat. This is a group activity. What have we learned? What have we learned from watching these videos? We watched his first videos, and then we watched the rebuttal to those videos. What have we learned? I would say that there were a lot of points, a lot of core points that Pirate brought up in his videos that were misrepresenting the goals of the initiative. He painted it as that they were the goals of the initiative, and then as we saw in our own exploration of that, but as well as in Ross's video, more mainly in Ross's video, we saw that those did not make sense, or that he was arguing things that the initiative wasn't even arguing. So at that point, it's not useful for the sake of talking about the initiative. We learned, that the majority of what he has been covering, what he has been talking about in this, a lot of this has come from the perspective of a publisher. And then Ross is focused on the perspective of protecting consumer rights. He comes from that, he has a bachelor's in the criminal justice, whatever that's called. He has a major in that. So he's focusing on consumer rights. So we're left with fundamentally understanding that he has misrepresented a lot of those points. whether it be malicious or not, that's up to you to decide. Based off of what I've seen, I don't think so. I think, if anything, any malice has come towards the end of it when he's been receiving a lot of pushback and a lot of people saying, hey, you're wrong. And his inability to, swallow his ego and accept that, or try to do anything in terms of like, trying to rectify that in any way, has really, really turned a lot of people against him, has really made a lot of a very toxic environment around himself and his streams and his chat. But now, with that understanding that we have, I would say, developed that on our own volition, we worked through that. We watched his content, and then we saw, Ross provide some more context with some of the points that he was made that maybe even I didn't understand when he was talking about it, like the server issues or in those edge cases. And now we've come full circle. Okay. So he goes through summaries, talk about the potential scenarios. I then explain. So my main issue with this initiative is that it is broad in its approach to change the industry, and the exact language of the initiative, not the FAQ, requests that all games stay in a functional, playable state. He says this is not feasible for all games at a technical level and could potentially restrict developers from making online-only games like MMOs, MOBAs, and user-generated content games in the future. That list is not exhaustive, and it doesn't matter if you do or don't like those kinds of games. So, this not being feasible is strictly an opinion of Thor. And as you saw, the other opinion of that was Ross, providing examples of how you could feasibly create games in the future that would be able to facilitate these changes with the Stop Killing Games initiative and allow people to create making MMOs, MOBAs, and the likes. Because so long as developers like money, they're going to make these games. And then following below that, effectively, this has the potential to restrict future developers from making kick-ass experiences because it locks a weight on their designs. Again, that ruining creativity doesn't make as much sense. Again, he provided examples showcasing, they'll get licensing, or they're going to have to stop getting those licensings from those third parties and have to come up with a different negotiation to make it applicable. And then he says down here, even though this is an initiative that can change in the future, this goal is core to the mission and deeply disruptive, so it needs to be called out. Again, I think that's up for you guys to decide, but I don't think that that is the case. And then I guess we could talk about this. I left AAA in 2016 because I fucking hate how the industry is now and prefer indie entirely. I don't like Blizzard, or I would have stayed working there. That's why I quit. That's the entire point. Fuck AAA and what many studios have turned games into. Outside of that, I am not financially supported by live service games. I make a single-player RPG, and I'm the director of strategy for off-brand games. In that position, I am paid minimum wage by my own decision because I care about games succeeding, not about profiting off of them. To further this, the games we're publishing are all playable offline anyway because their gameplay loops are not only based on interplayer interaction. Not all games are like this, and not all games can be like this. No, I've not been running away from the discourse on this. I talked about it for around 8 hours on stream yesterday. I never took my video down, and I have not discussed the initiative in the 10 months it's been since I released those videos. My internet also died, so he's talking about blah, blah, blah. So for those that will scream, he's doubling down. Yes, I am. Yes, I damn well am. I give a shit about this initiative and what it means for games developers and players in the future. Again, doubling down when the focus of this, I'm going to skip an ad for you guys. When the focus of this is talking about how he's misrepresented this. It's not about doubling down about your values and what you share about that. It's about you doubling down on things that you were just blatantly incorrect about. That's what people have an issue with, and that's why people will laugh at you for saying that you're doubling down. Just because I don't support this doesn't mean you should blindly follow me in that just because I said pretty words on the internet. You also shouldn't blindly bash me because some other creator said to. Watch the videos I put out, read the initiative, decide for yourself. Apply critical thinking and don't outsource it to others. As always, stay frosty. So he shows those. He's also got proof of his minimum wage. I believe him. I don't have a reason not to. And then he followed that up. Constant battle with people online. And then this is, as we established earlier, he's just talking about how infeasible it is. But even then, which I think is really interesting, he's got Apparently, this is a game developer. From one dev to another, you lack the intellectual octane to maneuver this space. Many games, specifically multiplayer games, solved 90% of preservation issues decades ago. We just stopped doing it so we could push customers to the yearly reskin because that was more profitable. The problem has already been solved. It's strange to see a dev so lost on this. There's a few hangups with MTX, but that is a design problem and not a preservation problem, full stop. Stay clear, man, please. So we have another developer that is saying, hey, you just don't think that there's a way, but there are. And Pirate said, if you want to build an online only game, they go into a back and forth. Matter of fact, I'll link to this tweet so you guys can feel free to read it. I'm not trying to obfuscate, but this video has gone on long enough. He argues back and forth with this guy for quite a decent amount of time. If you guys want to pause and read. I don't want to speak on it because I don't know enough about game dev, or game design to really speak to what they start talking about and getting in the weeds about. What I will say is the fact that there is another game developer that is chatting with them and saying, hey, this stuff's been solved. That was the interesting part to me. Of course, it's just someone on Twitter. But you got to do my standard recording stuff. What do you guys think? Please make sure to leave a comment down below. I would love to have a discussion with these people. Again, I disagree pretty staunchly with PirateSoftware, but I'd love to see him have a conversation with Ross. I think that would be a benefit to everybody. And I really do think that that would be the goal. I'm interested to hear what you guys think. I'm hoping, honestly, Mario, the lawyer in black, I hope he sees this so that, he could comment on it. I don't know how much expertise he would have in this specifically, but it's crazy. I really hope the Stop Killing Games initiative ends up going forward. I wish I lived in the EU so I could sign it myself. Again, if you guys, any of you are from the EU, I suggest signing it. I really do, and pushing that forward, because I really do think it's got a really good thing going for consumers of video games, and it's for our benefit. It's not like we've been happy with how games have developed in the over the last couple of years. And I think that would in total be a great thing. I would love to make sure that I can play Dota even when they end up hitting the kill switch on it. It is my favorite game of all time. And so making sure that that's playable for me and my buddies when we're geriatric and in our 40s and still playing, the same meta that's been in place for like a decade, I would love that. Yeah, that would be amazing. But I think that wraps it up. I hope you guys enjoyed watching the video. I'm sorry for how long it is, and I'll see you guys later. Adios, peace, bye. And then I'll do this. I'll go, and that's how the video will end. Oh, also, I got to try this out. Hold on. Also, I think another really good point that's brought up here, you guys aren't subscribed yet. You're balls deep into this video and you haven't hit the subscribe button. Even if that's a little too committal, consider giving the video a like. Helps boost it up in the algorithm. I'd really appreciate it. Trying to get a silver play button. That'd be sick. But enjoy the rest of the video. So there, I'll insert that at some point in the video. There we go. Balls deep. Yeah. So I got a good stream. Thank you guys so much. I really do hope you guys liked it. If you're interested, wanting to join the Discord, I'm sure I'm going to be doing more of these in the future. I've kind of been revitalized on my efforts to get back into making some better content, making it more frequently. I should have this done and edited by tonight. Here, let me actually cut the recording. I'll keep the stream going. So, be on the lookout for more stuff in the future as well. Here is a link to wait, what the hell? It's right there. Oh, thank you. Perfect. Got a link there too. Feel free to join. We'll chat sometime. But I think that's it. I think we did a good job here. If you guys have any questions, shoot them in the Discord. But yeah, have a good night. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you around. See you next stream. Adios. Peace. Bye.